Very good evening to you and welcome. And in particular, I'd like to welcome, in most cases online, Councillor Perry Bath, Councillor Bill Soane, Councillor Gregor Murray, Steve Moore, Richard Bissett, Lorinda Bra, Nick Spencer, Diana Toby, Andy Glencross, Rob Curtis, Jackie Whitney, and also any members of the Community and Corporate Services Overview and Scrutiny Group, because they are coming to join in on the domestic abuse item. And for that reason, Andy Glenn, if you're willing, I'd like to take that item before the waste strategy. Thank you. Just a reminder, we have got a heavy agenda, so please can you keep your questions brief and not make them part of a speech? Also, this isn't a committee for confrontation and political point scoring, but it's one where we work together to bring about the best services the council can offer. I've been asked to ask you, please, when you're not speaking, could you wear your mask? And Callum also has something to ask you about the mayor's thing.
Yes, just for any members that haven't arrived, the mayor has asked that if you wish to, the anti-hate crime charter is available to be signed. But if you need a bit of time to think about it, we'll bring it to every meeting for the next few weeks anyway, so you'll have an opportunity.
Thank you very much, Callum. I know a lot of you've signed it already, but if you haven't, please have a think about that. It's quite an important document, a very important document. Okay, let's look at the agenda then. And the first item is apologies for absence. Neil?
So we have Guy Grandison, Sam Akhtar, and Chris Bowring and Michael Firminger are here as substitutes. And from an officer point of view, Steve Moore sends apologies.
Thank you very much. And the minutes of the previous meeting, page 8, are there any matters arising? No, in which case, can I see those in favour of them as a correct record? Are there any against or any abstentions? Michael, you weren't here before.
Well, yeah, I mean, sort of simply because I wasn't at that meeting. That was all.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest.
Just a point on the minutes, Chairman. We had a request to consider the format of the minutes. I believe Councillor Jones, who is with us online.
Oh,
sorry.
Alison.
May I speak? Yes. At a recent meeting of HOSC, Councillor Jones, who was a member of that committee but isn't any longer, raised a query that in the minutes he felt that members should be named. And I explained we had addressed this previously at OS management, that we felt it was consistent that all of the minutes for the 4 committees simply detailed a member, because of the fact we're very much working on a cross-party united way to add value for our scrutiny, rather than promoting ourselves. But I did agree that this should be raised at this meeting, and I did mention it to you, Chairman, last week that we would look at this again.
So do you have a proposal, Alison?
I consider that it is the best way, as it's simply, a member asked, because the important thing is the question and the answer, not who's asking it.
So to keep it just a member rather than put the names, is that what you're proposing?
That's what I would propose.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Thank you very much. Right, shall we move straight to a vote on that? It's a very straightforward thing to agree. Oh, Clive, yes. Clive, do come in.
Yes, thank you very much, Pauline. I think that this is something that is looked at by in different ways by a number of councils. West Berkshire and the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead do name their councillors in their minutes, and I think that is very respectful to the councillors who have taken the time to go through the agendas and come up with questions for the executive and for different senior officers within the council. And it shows residents that those councillors are working on their behalf. To do anything other than that, in my view, is disrespectful to a councillor, and the accusation that it is self-promotion, I think, is also very disrespectful to any councillor who goes through an agenda and finds quite a number of questions that they would like to ask. So I have brought this up at Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny. I've been a member of that committee for 4 or 5 years, and I have brought it up at the HOSC committee. I was a member of that committee for 3 years until recently, and I have brought this up on a few occasions and haven't got anywhere with it. But I am very clear that not to name a councillor who asks a question is particularly disrespectful to that councillor and also to the residents that that councillor is representing. So I would like to see us go back to a system that we used for many years in Wokingham and start to name a councillor who asks a question, makes a comment, because not all of the comments are anti what the ruling group might be doing. They're not anti what officers might be doing. An awful lot of comments that I personally make are very supportive of council officers and sometimes of executive members. So it isn't always negative, and it certainly isn't, and it is disrespectful to suggest it is, self-promotion.
Thank you, Clive. Has anyone else got anything they want to say? In which case we will move to a vote then on Alison's motion. Can I see those in favour, please?
Can I have clarification on what the wording is, please?
Alison, would you like to say it again?
I propose we continue that all comments are simply ascribed to a member.
Thank you. Right, those in favour of that as a proposal? And those against? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Then I will abstain and that motion is carried. All right, then let's move to the declarations of interest. Michael.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got a declaration of interest. It's with regard to the waste strategy and my role as Deputy Executive Member of Environment and Communities. I won't be taking part in that voting or anything.
Thank you very much. Thanks. There are no public questions, no member questions, and so we'll move, leaving out the waste strategy just for the moment, to item 39, the domestic abuse strategy. Who's going to present that? One of the officers or? Lorinda, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to open very briefly just to introduce our Specialist Domestic Abuse Coordinating Officer, Karen Evans, who's prepared this paper tonight. And I'm going to let Karen introduce and just open the paper with any questions supported by myself and Karen tonight, if that's okay.
Yes, welcome. Thank you very much. Go on then, over to you.
Thank you. So the domestic abuse strategy for Wokingham, we previously had a strategy in place which was 2017 to 2020. We delayed refreshing that at the end of last year while we're waiting for the Domestic Abuse Act to take effect and come into law. But we're now at a position that we want to renew, we want to refresh that strategy, but we also want to incorporate the council's new duties under the Domestic Abuse Act, in particular Part 4 of the Act, which is around providing support for victims of domestic abuse and their children in safe accommodation. So we're talking about accommodation, for example, the refuge, emergency temporary accommodation, which is designated for domestic abuse survivors. Also thinking of the home refuge scheme, which is like a sanctuary scheme. So putting in place additional target hardening measures. So the strategy that we're proposing incorporates both of those factors. So the Part 4 requirement to put together a strategy and also the wider domestic abuse response from collectively across the whole council and our partner organisations. In terms of timings, the government's issued statutory guidelines which come out from the Department of Levelling Up and Housing and Communities, and they are quite prescriptive in what needs to be included in the Part 4 strategy. So all of those requirements are taken in place. They're all sort of incorporated into the draft that I've sent around for everyone to have a look at in advance. And as I say, so we've got that Part 4 support element there alongside that wider domestic abuse response. Backing up the strategy, you'll see throughout the strategy we've identified 5 key priority areas for our Part 4 duty, also 6 priority areas for our wider domestic abuse response. And from those, we're developing a really detailed action plan in partnership with our partners across the whole of Wokingham, who are doing in some way supporting victims, perpetrators, children, young people affected by domestic abuse. So really that detailed action plan really underpinning all of the strategy document that we've put in place. In terms of publication, we're required by law to publish the strategy by the 5th of January 2022. That has been delayed. It was originally July this year, then the end of October. Now it's 5th of January, but my understanding is that date won't move again from there. So really welcome the opportunity today to talk to you about the strategy and also get any comments, any feedback. We really want this to be a living document, so really including the views of everyone in terms of what makes a really good response for Wokingham. We're also really conscious that when we spoke to members of the public, when we sought feedback around the consultation, people are saying that they really want this to be a meaningful strategy. So they want to see real actions, and we're really focused on that. In order to put the strategy together, we've undertaken really detailed, robust needs assessment linked to that Part 4 duty. So we've got in specialist support from standing together. They're specialists around housing elements of domestic abuse. So they've looked at national best practice and then drilled down into what support we've got available in Wokingham to identify where our gaps are, where we've got gaps we need to address. We've also done a really in-depth analysis of data that we've got. So from police, from housing, from health, all the organisations that collect data that they can flag as being domestic abuse, looking at that and looking where we're well represented and also where we're really underrepresented. So, for example, what we're seeing is a real lack of male victims visible in our services. Also older people, people who've got a disability, people who've got additional barriers actually to face in their response. So really including that within the response. Within our strategy, we also have to look at people with protected characteristics, identifying what key barriers might be in place for them and how we're going to respond to that. So say we've done a data analysis, we've done in-depth analysis of what housing options we've got available at the moment. We've also done in-depth interviews with victims and people who can speak on behalf of children and young people who are victims of domestic abuse, and also partner organisations to really get a good holistic view of what is it like if you live in Wokingham or you need to flee to Wokingham as a result of domestic abuse. What is your experience like? What are those gaps? And then how can we look to address those through the strategy and the linked action plan? In terms of governance, we've established 2 new groups. We've got a partnership board in place, which is really driving through that Part 4 duty, and that is made up of statutory members that we're required to include within law, but we have also been really careful to make sure that we've got representation for people who can speak on behalf of those with protected characteristics. And so I say, so that's how we sort of got to where we are. I have sent through the document in advance, but really welcome comments, thoughts. You know, are you happy with the direction we're taking? And are you happy as we sort of move forward with getting that ratified in so that it can be published on our website by the 5th of January as required? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a very sound and detailed report. Thank you very much to all of those who put it together. I particularly appreciated the quotes from people who had been abused as well as the other consultees. I see Sarah Kerr and Rachel and Jim and Michael and Rochelle and Alison. In that order, please. Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Karen. I know how hard you and the guys have worked on this, and I can spot Vicky from Kaleidoscopic's influence on it and some of the language in there, actually. I think it's a really good document, really thorough, and there's just a few little points I wanted to pick up on, if that's okay. One of those is around language. There's one little piece of language I would hope that there could be some consideration in adapting slightly, and it's this terminology throughout that says victims and children. One of the things I've noticed is that children that haven't directly suffered the abuse but have witnessed the abuse they're obviously still victims, but that's not always recognised, as we know, and that needs to change. And by separating them out and calling them victims and children, I think that language could be counterproductive to the change that we need to make there. I appreciate that we still need to recognise children in this, but I wonder if we could say victims which include children, maybe. Just a thought there, but separating it out I don't think is going to change bring the change about that we need in recognising that children are victims when they witness a parent suffering abuse from another parent. I'd be interested to see more of the action plan coming out of this. And there's a particular area that I'm quite interested in, is it's the awareness raising side of things, and particularly the preventative stuff. Obviously, most victims don't recognise that they're actually suffering from domestic abuse. And it's not until they're in front of trained professionals that that might be recognised. And I saw a really interesting video by the Gabby Petito Foundation, where it was a female police officer that recognised a domestic abuse case, but no one else recognised it. And I'd be interested to know what's going to happen with regards to raising the awareness in society for just everyday people and other people in society recognising this, because people who are victims are sometimes going to require intervention because they don't recognise it. So I'd be interested in understanding what's going to happen there. I will raise again the issue of training in children's services, in particular for post-separation abuse, coercive control, and I'd like to understand how progress is going there, because we don't want to keep being in a situation where children are going back to abusive parents because the term parental conflict is used. And also, I just wanted to understand a little bit more about the safe accommodation for different kinds of people. I know that we've moved to Cranston. I appreciate that in the report it states that Berkshire Women's Aid couldn't fulfil everything, but I'd like to understand how Cranston is going to fulfil the safe accommodation, because you can't have men and women in the same refuge. You cannot have someone who's a victim, or a survivor rather, who also has substance misuse when someone else in the same refuge has obviously. So I'd like to understand how we're actually going to tackle that. So that's a few questions to get going on there.
Right, thank you. That's actually 4 questions. Would you like to deal with them then, please?
Yeah, sure. If I can briefly. So in terms of the first one was about terminology, victims and children. So in a lot of the document, we're using the statutory guidance wording. And it's quite important in that we're looking at, because our element and what we're required to do is provide support within safe accommodation. And actually, if we just put victims, we might lose sight of the children support element. So it's very much reflective of the language that's used in the statutory guidance. But I will go through and double check if there's any where that isn't quite clear, or perhaps we could, in the terminology section, we could perhaps put that at the start as well, because obviously we recognise that children are victims in their own right, as Councillor Kerr's quite rightly said. So I'll go through and double check for that. In terms of awareness raising, yeah, we're very much looking holistically. So we're looking at how we can get information to family members, to neighbours, to bystanders, colleagues, you know, alongside that direct input for people who might be directly victims themselves. But really conscious that, as you quite rightly said, people quite often don't think about domestic abuse until it's actually happening to them, or they notice it with a colleague, a friend. So very much looking at the domestic violence disclosure scheme, really kind of pushing that where family, other people kind of recognise as an issue. But very happy to share my awareness, you know, the action plan, if that's helpful to really give the detail on that. So we're looking at things like going out with citizens' advice with their new mobile advice unit that they've got. We're looking at how we can get posters, information into different community venues, looking potentially at creating some videos which we can subtitle in different languages to kind of meet the needs of diverse people. Also thinking about British Sign Language videos and information. So really trying to think, how can we best use our resources so that we really kind of target that information in the right way, but that we don't waste money by sort of producing things that people don't need. We're also looking at the council's new platform, which is being created, the Engage platform. So think about how directly we can get the feedback from our residents. So thinking, have you seen posters? You know, where do you think they should be? Have you seen them in the GP surgery? So really making sure that we've got sort of smart outcomes linked to the action plan. In terms of training for children's services, we've got a very detailed training plan now for children's services and other departments. There's been a lot of input given on the subjects that you've mentioned. So post-separation abuse, coercive control. Children's services have also accessed really in-depth trauma-informed training as well. So there is a really comprehensive training offer for children's services staff, which is progressing. Alongside that, we're also kind of developing that with the multi-agency responses as well, because obviously we don't, you know, children's services got a really important element, but we also want to think about everybody in the council might come into contact with victims of domestic abuse, but also our multi-agency partners, of which we're very fortunate to have quite a lot. Safe accommodation was the other thing, and absolutely there would never be a case where you'd have mixed refuge accommodation. It will always be single gendered accommodation. Cranston are working to get a new refuge up and running, so we're really fortunate Berkshire Women's Aid continue to run the refuge in Wokingham, which is a 3-bedroom refuge for female victims. The Cranston refuge is also likely to be for female victims, which will take our provision up to 7. We're still some way off what we need, because we should really have 1 refuge space per 10,000 population, adult population. So we've still got big gaps. There's no refuge provision at all for men across the whole of Thames Valley area, and also people who've got larger families, complex needs, say substance misuse alongside domestic abuse issues. That is always going to be challenging. We can obviously access refuge provision across the country for those specialist needs, but we do recognise that actually, you know, we're making a start, but we've still got quite a long way to try and make sure we've got a really comprehensive offer, you know, that meets the needs of all the victims that might present here.
Thank you very much. Rachel.
Thank you, and thank you, Karen, for your strategy. It's very, very detailed and thorough. I just wanted to pick up on some of the gaps that you were just mentioning, actually. So, you know, in terms of the safe accommodation and the refuge, just looking at page 43 of the pack, there are some actually quite sizable gaps, aren't there? So, for example, within a year, we've got 108 cases where no space or suitable room was available, and another 33 where wasn't able to offer space. You know, another 37 complex needs, unable to access. You've partly answered it in your previous in the previous question, but it's just more around what we're doing to try and close those gaps. You know, it sounds to me like there is a real risk there that those gaps are going to remain. and not really close as much as they should be doing. So I don't know if you'd be able to say a bit more about what we're really going to be doing as part of the strategy to close that gap and just recognise that there is a big risk there.
Yes, thank you. And so in terms of the information on page 43 regarding the refuge figures, so that's information from BWA, who were the commissioned service at the time. So they've counted all the calls that they've got asking for refuge provision. So it's so they're obviously were only able to take a limited number of people anyway, because it was a 3-bedroom refuge, but they've sort of been able to log exactly why they had to turn people away, whether it was because they hadn't got capacity or whether it was these additional needs, which helps give us a bit of a flavour about who's calling. What's difficult to kind of really specify is that obviously if somebody tries the Wokingham Domestic Abuse Refuge and there's no space, they then will phone perhaps the Bracknell Forest Refuge, then the Windsor Maidenhead one, and sort of be phoning all around the country if they haven't got access to that the database to find out where there's gaps. So potentially those numbers could be people who are phoning, making like multiple phone calls, probably most likely to be practitioners phoning up and just trying to find, is this refuge suitable for this person that I've got here presenting as homeless because of domestic abuse. So it gives us a really good idea about what sort of gaps we've got. But say with the numbers, it's a bit difficult because, as I say, potentially someone's been trying multiple times and we've only ever going to have capacity for those sort of 3 spaces at the moment, and then hopefully up to 7 spaces.
Thank you very much. And Jim.
Thank you, Chair. Karen, echo what the others said, a very comprehensive strategy. I like to see how strategy gets turned into action. So a couple of simple questions, really. This is an update of an existing strategy. So how successful was the strategy we currently have? And secondly, what will be the fundamental differences from this new strategy that we'll be able to see in this area?
Yeah, so in terms of the strategy, obviously when it was written in 2017, we've had lots and lots of developments since then. So we've got the domestic abuse bill that then became an act. So there's quite a lot of ways in which our understanding of domestic abuse have sort of developed. We're seeing a large number of people coming forward for help, which I think is really positive and sort of shows that there were a lot of things from the previous action plan and the strategy that have actually made a difference. But obviously we're on a journey, we've got a long way to go. Fundamental differences with this new strategy are around that Part 4 duty. So thinking about what do we know now, and also reflecting kind of best practice, research findings, our understanding of certain protective characteristics and how domestic abuse impacts on those people is really increasing. We're getting lots of research. I think particularly in terms of COVID, that helped in a way in that a lot of research projects really kind of move forwards with real gusto. So we're getting lots of findings coming out. We're really understanding a lot more. So in terms of the changes, really, I suppose it's an update from what we knew before, supplementing that with what actually people are telling us now, what new best practice is, what research findings are, and then sort of including all that, and also looking at those specific new responsibilities we've got. The other key change is that we have got to support this Part 4 duty. We have been given quite a reasonable allocation of money to meet that new duty. So that means that we can commission new services. We can put in place a lot of things that we might not have been able to do without that extra funding. But just to remind everyone, it is that support element. So we can't, for example, buy a new building with the money to then make into a refuge. It can only be around the support element within that refuge provision. So it's quite specific what we can use the funding for. We're also sort of thinking ahead as well, because we've got the Victims Bill, which I understand will be introduced into Parliament very shortly. And if that also includes duties around support for victims of domestic abuse, then again, we will probably or hopefully get additional funding, which enables us to move forward with that. There's also a call for action, so for a national perpetrator strategy, because we can put all the responses in place for victims of domestic abuse and children. But actually what we want to do is really tackle those root causes. And if we can prevent someone, if we can really encourage people who've got abusive behaviour to kind of make changes and to actually become much more healthy in their relationships, then we're probably going to have a really massive impact, because that's going to impact on future generations, future partners, etc. So we're really trying to sort of look ahead with this strategy, thinking what's coming up and sort of having that in place so that we can hopefully be prepared for these future things as well as what we actually know now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that all right, Jim? Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you for that, Karen. That was very informative presentation there, and quite. I think what we're signing here already about hate crime as well. It's all kind of linked, isn't it? That there are some very unpleasant people out there. I think one of the things, and I just want to confirm or clarify a couple of points, but it's amazing. It's not. This kind of can affect anybody potentially, which is the frightening thing about it. But I just wanted to ask a question, maybe to clarify on the. I know that how all this is reported, because I think that's absolutely key. That's the first contact, and get people to safety, as soon as possible. I know that's the police, children's services, adult services, whatever. I just really wondered how that actually happens, and what also would happen, say out of business hours, the weekend, evenings, that sort of thing. Because I think that's kind of likely when a lot of this will take place anyhow. You can't really wait for a Monday morning, can you? You've got to get people pretty quickly out of that situation. Just really want some clarification on that, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of emergency response, quite often it will be the police that get those calls, because you say it's 24/7, crisis point, somebody calls for help, police will go and attend the incident. They'll then risk assess and take immediate safety planning measures. In terms of people who perhaps aren't calling the police for whatever reason at that particular point, perhaps if they've got perhaps it's they kind of recognise what's happening, it's abusive, they want to get out of that situation, they want to make changes. The commission service under Cranston is a 24/7 hour service, so people can phone. The phones are answered by our local Wokingham staff in Cranston between 9 and 5 Monday to Friday, but outside those hours there's an emergency on-call service with their team leaders, so people can always speak to someone, they can always get some help. Again, with homelessness, so quite often it might be somebody needs to actually flee now. So we've got the homelessness team in the working hours, but also they're out of our service. So there would always be an emergency response. It's not ideal because in a lot of cases, probably you wouldn't want someone moving into a refuge in the middle of the night. So it might be that the next day is when it's kind of sorted out how that can happen. But people would always be supported and kept safe, from whatever time of day or night that they call for help. And I say, we are really conscious that a lot of people, as you say, aren't going to be able to call for help within those office hours. So that out of service is really important. Also thinking about access, some people can access online information. So kind of thinking about what's going to be most appropriate for that individual.
Thank you. And Rochelle?
I'm a domestic abuse survivor, both as a child and as an adult. I have to say that this is a very good thing that happened. Not what happened to me, but what is happening now. My question is, what's happening to the under 16-year-olds? You're talking about 16 and above. I know as a school governor, we're taught safeguarding, and safeguarding includes children, and all primary school teachers have to report any abuse to the appropriate authority. What are we doing to help children in the process too, and to realize and tell children that they're not supposed to get abused, and that is they are supposed to be treated reasonably. Now, I'm not telling them they should run wild and drive their parents crazy, which is probably something that most children would like to do, but there should be something in there to have curriculum for children to explain that they do not deserve this and what they should do if it's going, and who they should talk to a teacher, talk to a friend, talk to someone.
Good point. I've got an answer to that, Karen.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just a bit worried because it says connect here. My connection is going to go, it says in a minute, but hopefully that won't happen. If it is, I'll come straight back. But yes, so the definition of domestic abuse, government definition, is 16 plus. So anybody who's under the age of 16 doesn't technically come under the definition of domestic abuse, and that's the reason that the strategy strategy is kind of worded in that way. It used to be adults, so 18 plus, but it was changed to be 16 and over, because it was recognised that a lot of teenage abuse relationships are abusive, and actually 16, 17-year-olds need to be able to access commissioned domestic abuse services. So in terms of anybody who's under the age of 18, as well as obviously being able to access that specialist domestic support, abuse support, if they're age 16 plus, they're also come under child protection. So they would also get children's services involvement. If they're under the age of 16, then it's primarily dealt with as child protection. But you're quite right, obviously, that, you know, relationships, sibling relationships, you know, intimate relationships might be under that age. We are, as part of our action plan, we are looking at working with the schools. So we have got education represented on both of our domestic abuse groups, but also looking at what is in place in schools at the moment. They are statutorily required to provide relationship education, but kind of looking at what that is. Kaleidoscopic are developing an Educate to Eradicate programme, and they are piloting that. That's going to start in January. So very much we're kind of looking as our group how we can support that and try and get it rolled out into other schools as well. But no, absolutely, really key, you know, key that we get information into schools. I go to all the safeguarding schools meetings for Wokingham schools, secondary and primary, really kind of reinforce the importance of making sure they've got the support, the information that they need in place in the schools so they can respond to those children.
Okay, that's a good point, Rachel. Thank you very much. And Alison.
Yes, thank you very much for the work of the board and this consultation. It's very informative. It's excellent to see that, you know, you reached out and taken on board all the experiences that people have given you. And I would echo what Pauline said, that, you know, having the quotes and the illustrations of people's journeys really helps us to understand more. I'd like to understand a little bit more about the home refuge scheme, where you're installing a sanctuary when somebody's chosen and it's possible to enhance the physical security of their own home, which looks like a great option if it is possible and the best thing. But there haven't been any referrals this year. I wondered what the big challenge is to get more referrals and what you're able to do about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think our home refuge scheme is one of the things like I feel really proud of with Wokingham. I think, you know, it's far more utilised than I know in many other areas in the county. And, you know, it's a really great service. As you say, the parties need to be separated for that to be safe, because what we don't want to do is put in loads of security measures, which then in effect make a victim even more of a prisoner within their own home. In terms of the comment about no referrals this year, that was what Standing Together found for a specific time period, but actually that is very much not the case now. We're seeing a real increase again in those numbers. We're concerned that we're not getting many people come forward for help where they're homeowners, and that is something that, you know, it's available to all tenures and really important for homeowners to know that they can access that service. But yeah, so I think it was a little blip with the comment there about the number of referrals at that point, but they're sort of way back up again now and certainly higher than they were this time last year.
Okay, is there anybody else that wants to say anything? Rebecca.
Thank you, Karen, for the report. You've kind of answered this, but from listening to all the wonderful things you're doing and all the work you've put in, how are you going to really get this message out? So to us, to the public, to the people that are suffering. So you've talked, you know, you briefly said about posters and working with schools. What other kind of forms of media do you think you're going to use to get that message out there?
Yeah, and it is a massive challenge really, because we know that a lot of people, for example, information on websites or even out and about, you know, a lot of people might not see that information. So we're trying to go as far and wide as we can with the coverage. So very much social media we're looking at, but also that written, those hard copy versions that we know people need. So we're looking at the Engage platform, how we can engage with residents. Certainly in the needs assessment, we reached out to people who might not have otherwise come into contact with the services, trying to find out sort of what, you know, how they accessed information. But it is very much a a kind of a drip, thinking about every option. You know, potentially, if, for example, we could put something on the back of council tax bills, you know, information, you know, that will go to everybody. We put information in some of the leaflets, the publications that go out from the council, just to try and, you know, reach as many people as we can. But it is obviously a challenge. So again, role of councillors really, really important, because you're actually out and about, you're speaking to people. So just really having it quite high on your radar. If you are doing any newsletters or anything to keep I can't say it, you know what I mean, constituents. Then, you know, we'd love for some information to go in, because the more that we can put the information in covertly, so that drip, rather than perhaps just a leaflet that lands which says domestic abuse and might sort of increase someone's you know, risk of abuse if the perpetrator finds it and thinks they've been looking for that information. You know, anything that can be more covert, the better. So, for example, the Housing Matters magazine, you know, just having some information on there alongside everything else that's in there, really good way of getting that information out. But yeah, it is quite challenging. We know radio quite often has a big impact. We used to use newspapers a lot, but of course not so many people are accessing newspapers now in hard copy. So it's thinking about how we develop this and, you know, utilise everything we can, really.
Okay, Norman.
Thank you. I just one of the comments that you made was about the funding, which is for support, but not accommodation as such. And go back to the figures on the refuge, you know, the number of individuals that couldn't be accommodated. What's the distinction between the definition of support? What sort of support, and what happens to the people that that can't be accommodated? What do we do for that? Thank you.
So in terms of the accommodation, people will always be found safe accommodation by presenting as homeless. So I think that's under section 7, I think it is. So if you're a domestic abuse victim, you can present anywhere you want to. You don't have to have that local connection. You know, there's quite a lot of priority in terms of support for people. So in terms of the actual physical accommodation, your room, your bed and that is covered by the legislation. And then the support element, which is a new element, is so actually how we're going to support someone while they're there. So one of the things we're doing, for example, is that we're getting a specialist domestic abuse worker embedded within the homelessness team. So actually someone presents as homeless because of domestic abuse, and they've got that specialist support there to really handhold them through to getting that safe accommodation. Support could be financial planning. It could be in terms of they need help with getting a school uniform. It might be they need to speak to a counsellor, safety planning. So it's all those kind of things that you know, might be needed within that safe accommodation. So that kind of basic need, that house is there in place, but actually what extra do they need? So we've heard from people who've had like, you know, they've got that room has been put there, so they've got a safe room, but it hasn't got any furniture in it, hasn't got any curtains, carpets, and actually it makes it very difficult for them to sustain living there. So thinking about that support, what would mean that somebody can actually feel safe, access all the information that they need, and then start moving on, rebuilding their lives.
Thank you. If nobody else has got anything to ask, I've got 2 questions, Karen. Looking at page 18 and 19, and you actually said we've got a long way to go in some areas. I'm a little bit puzzled by this column called impact score. The second bullet point down says there are currently no refuge provision in Thames Valley for male victims of domestic abuse. And at the bottom, it says increased safe accommodation options will positively increase options available. And I'm puzzled about why those are regarded as positives. That's the first thing. And secondly, it says this will be addressed, but can you say how it's going to be addressed, please?
Yeah, sure. So we've identified that having no refuge provision for men is a gap, and it's a gap that's not just a Wokingham gap, it's a Thames Valley-wide gap. So we're looking at whether we can work with other areas, neighbouring areas, to actually put some provision in place across Thames Valley. but alongside that also looking, have we got any sort of options? You know, we've got new developments of housing. Is there a building that potentially might be suitable as a refuge? You know, so being quite proactive in terms of trying to identify somewhere that might be suitable. So although the funding we've got doesn't help us in terms of the purchase of these accommodation, what happens is when someone goes into a refuge, when they live there, they have to pay rent in some format. So it might be through housing benefits, or it might be that they pay for their rent if they're working, for example. So most of the cost in actually running the refuge and getting that physical accommodation can be met through that rental side of things. So it's a case of us trying to find somewhere that would be suitable. Once that's been identified, then we can commission support to go in to actually run the refuge and provide that support within the refuge.
Why are they regarded as positives then?
I can't, sorry, I'll have to have a look at these.
Page 18 and 19.
Yes, sorry, I haven't got it.
Says impact score, positive. I'm a little bit at a loss as to understand what that's about.
Yeah, sorry, I just grabbed my cup. Perhaps I haven't phrased it very well or something. That's where it's good really to talk to people, because sometimes you kind of read things and then you think it kind of makes sense, but actually somebody else reading it thinks it doesn't. So in terms of, sorry, where have you got that it says positive?
Page 18, the second bullet point. There's no
Pauline, that's inside the equality impact assessment. So it's positive that it's being considered and weighted.
Is that the case? If so, I'm content.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for helping me out there.
My second question is, are the ways that people can contact help going to be put very clearly on our website?
Yes, so we've got domestic abuse web pages, which I've kind of recently redone and really expanded those. But I'm also asking for some user testing to take place to actually ask people, if you need to find particular information, can you find it? You know, and what routes are people going through? So yes, the support details are all on our website, but really kind of doing that user testing to make sure that actually people can find it. So if you're typing in domestic abuse Wokingham, you know, what information do you get? We have got a tab which says sources of support, and within that it kind of says, and we're kind of constantly sort of pushing that Cranston commissioned service, because that's available to all victims. And so that's kind of where we primarily want people to go for help, but also putting other options in as well for if people, you know, perhaps need some specific help, perhaps if it's in terms of like their legal options or financial help.
Thank you, and thank you again for all of your work. Some of these experiences that are exemplified in this report are truly heartbreaking, really are. Now we've got a recommendation. I'm going to add some words to it, which I hope that you'll take on board. It says the committee is requested to note the report, ratify the implementation of the domestic abuse strategy 21-24, and I would like to add the words, comma, taking on board the points this committee has made, just to be sure they do get home. And we call that little one, that first sentence, and then little two, that the annual refresh and full review of this strategy in 2024 be reported to this scrutiny committee so that we can review its success.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, if nobody's got any comments on that, can I put that to the vote then, please? That's the recommendation. Those in favour? Thank you very much. That seems to be unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, all of you who've put this strategy together and for coming this evening. It was a really worthwhile document. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you tonight.
Pleasure. Right then, now we move back to the waste strategy.
Sorry, Chair, before we move on to the next one, could I just raise a point, please, quickly about this committee? Back in June 2019, we had a report come to this committee, which was the government statutory guidance on overview and scrutiny, and one of the recommendations from that report was that deputy executive members were not supposed to be in these meetings, and we actually passed a proposal that you proposed that this committee doesn't have deputy executive members on it. And I'm conscious that tonight we actually have a deputy executive member sitting on the committee who technically shouldn't be here as a committee member.
Don't recall that, Sarah.
It's in the minutes. It was June.
I don't disbelieve you. I'm saying I don't.
Can Neil clarify? But you were the one who proposed it, actually. Can Neil just clarify that, please? It's June the 19th, 2019. Got the minutes here in front of me. So we're not supposed to have deputy exec members on the committee, I'm afraid.
Okay, point noted. All right, the waste strategy then.
We shouldn't be continuing with him as a member here, given that that was something that was passed. So he shouldn't be continuing as a committee member tonight.
Neil, would you like to give us some guidance, please?
I think that is accurate in terms of what the committee agreed. And Councillor Firmage is here as a deputy, as a substitute rather, not as a full member of the committee. And I think he's declaring an interest in the waste item. So I think it's for the committee to decide what they want to do about the situation.
Is he not sitting as a committee member tonight, substitute or not? Is he a committee member tonight?
He is a substitute for tonight, yes.
Yeah,
as a committee member.
But
Yeah.
So we declared he shouldn't be as a committee member.
he's not taking part in the topic that comes under his role.
Doesn't matter, it's what we declared in
Michael.
2019 and it's against what the statutory guidance.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Let's take this thing off. I did actually declare this earlier on, and I did raise this with you when you approached me to actually sub this meeting. I'm here as a substitute for Guy Grandison, Councillor Guy Grandison. So I'm not taking part in that item. I've said that already. I will not speak. I will not vote. I will not do anything on it whatsoever. So I'm hoping that in the spirit of scrutiny, which is not meant to be confrontational at all, and I feel it is getting a bit confrontational there, that I can do that. Because I'm quite astounded by those comments, to be perfectly honest. Thank you.
Well, I'm quite happy that Michael remains for this meeting and I won't ask him again, but he is not going to take part in this particular item.
Can I have it minuted, the comments I raised, please, Neil? Thank you.
Right, the waste strategy, item 38. Has everybody got a copy of the additional presentation that Neil sent round on Friday? If not, I think there's some spare ones over there. I want to go and get one. And Richard and Parry, I think, are here to speak on that. If I could just make a brief introduction. This is very much an overview of the strategy and really just the beginning of the process. It's a very high level document, just so that officers know that they can proceed with this work, and the details will come back later. So let's not get into the detail of it tonight. It's really just to see the way forward and approve that that is the right way forward. All right, Michael or Parry, Richard or Parry, which of you is going first?
Chairman, if I may just briefly introduce the subject, and then Richard and Rebecca can take over from me. Just a very short introduction, if I may, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not on this committee.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I want to briefly talk about the waste strategy that we are developing. And as you're aware, we have a climate emergency to deal with, and also we need to meet our budgetary provisions. It is also very important that our waste strategy fully meets the needs of our residents. And we must get this right. So I want to give you a short introduction to our waste strategy, followed by a high-level presentation from Richard Bissett and Rebecca Bird. As you're aware, Madam Chairman, that our current waste contract ends in 2026, and we need to start now, really, to embrace the future of our waste. We want to help meet our climate emergency target of carbon neutrality by 2030. We will do so by putting together a robust waste strategy to reduce waste and increase recycling up to 70% target. And most importantly, we want to meet the needs of our residents, and we will seek the residents' views to articulate and develop our waste strategy. That's all, Madam Chair. I'll now hand over to Richard and Rebecca.
Thank you. Richard.
Councillor Bath and Chairman and members of the committee, first of all, thank you very much indeed for inviting us here tonight to give you a high-level presentation in regards to the strategy. Whilst I'm doing that, I'll just give an introduction to myself. My name is Richard Bissett. I'm lead specialist for Woking Borough Council, and I have overall responsibility for refuse and recycling in the borough. Hopefully everyone can see my first slide. Perfect. Okay. So I think it's important to just echo Councillor Bath's suggestion there about our waste management and how residents see and have immense pride in terms of our services that we offer through a collection as well as a disposal aspect. As we said, we have an overview in terms of waste strategy. We're not getting down to detail. That will come in the future. However, what we will be looking at as agenda is a three-part agenda. I'll be taking through the first part, and then Rebecca will be handing over to Rebecca to follow up on the third part. So the agenda in total is looking at where we are now. Look at the current situation, look at our performance that we're undertaking at the moment, look at our costs, look at the challenges around that, including our targets, that's current as well as future, and also have a look at our waste tonnages. Then I'll take you through where we want to be. And we'll look at reducing our waste and costs as well as increasing our recycling. And then Rebecca will take over to look at the process elements of it, i.e. the timeline, the milestones and communications engagement. And it's absolutely key that we ask you as a committee for your feedback and observations of this, because it is absolutely a top priority of the council, and we need to make sure we get this right going forward, because it is a long-term strategy from 2026 onwards. So then, where are we now? We have a waste collection contract ending in 2026, which is undertaken by Veolia. And not surprisingly, a lot of things are increasing costs at the moment, and waste is no exception to those. This year, we're expected to spend in the region of £10.7 million on waste disposal and treatment this year. And that equates to around about £207 per household. As a direct comparator to our nearest neighbours, Reading and Bracknell, they're on around about £183 and £189 respectively. So you may ask the question, why are they on less or spending less per household than we are? And it's simply the matter that Woking Borough is producing over 70,000 tonnes of waste each year, which is near enough equivalent of a tonne a household. However, the good news is that over 50% of this is being recycled, but we want to push that even harder. As you well know, our collection system in place is on a weekly basis for both our recycling in terms of the green bags that have been introduced and performing really well, and the food waste that has been collected as well, and that's performing exceptionally well considering the impacts of COVID. Rubbish is via the blue bag system, and that is limited to 80 bags per property. And so we do have a limit into place for there to drive recycling as much as possible, and also reuse and minimising our waste. And additional blue bags can be purchased as a fiscal measure known as pay as you throw. So we do have some control on that element. However, everything we do in terms of our environment is through the climate emergency, and we declared a climate emergency, and we are committed to getting to 70% by 2030. But on top of that, what we want to do is have a look at our carbon output. That's internally as well as externally, especially around externals, putting aside the big carbon emitters of landfill and energy from waste. We want to have a look at our collection contract, and one of the main elements of carbon output there is through the vehicles. So we want to see what mechanisms or what practices that we could put in place to reduce our carbon going forward in the future from 2076 onwards. So that gives us an overview of the challenges that we're facing, and these challenges are not going to go away unless we confront them head on. So where do we want to be? We want to be in the position that we adopt a waste strategy by the beginning of 2023, and that will allow us two overall outcomes. One is to set the strategic direction and framework for the future so we get this right for our residents and ourselves, but also to allow us a path to begin tendering a waste collection contract from 2026 onwards, using best practice and also industry guidance. So those are the overall umbrella there, but our overall objectives are fourfold. Reducing our costs. At the moment, we're spending over £10.5 million each year treating and disposing our waste. It's just not sustainable in the longer term, and we have to address this. We need to reduce our waste and increase our recycling. And both these aspects will help reduce our costs and help us meet our climate emergency targets. And then finally, we want the best waste collection service possible there is for the future, and a collection service that our residents are proud of. So that brings me to my conclusion on my first part. I will now hand over to Rebecca, who will give a bit more detail in terms of process around timescales and communications and engagement.
Hello there. Thank you for having me this evening. As Richard said, I'm Rebecca Bird. I'm in the Communications, Engagement and Marketing team, and I'm working on the waste strategy with Richard. So what we tried to do was create a process that has multiple opportunities for residents and members to input into the creation of the waste strategy. So we've got a timeline there down the left. We're right now in October 2021, and we're in front of Overview and Scrutiny, where we're asking you to review the objectives and the process. We later this week are launching an early engagement. So that's a survey to understand residents' priorities about waste. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. In November, we will get input from the newly created Wokingham Youth Council. We will also lead member will create a cross-party member working group to lead this entire process. At the end of this year and the beginning of next year, December to January, we'll be working on data gathering and analysis. And the end result of that will be to produce the broad options in line with the feedback from this survey that we'll be doing later this week, and the steer from the working group. In February, we'll work with the climate emergency, a focus group on climate emergency, to get their views. Later in the spring, we will then look at all of the data and engagement and work to prepare to look at the variety of options that will be available to us. We'll then look in May to prepare an options paper and take that to the member working group, the cross-party member working group, and bring an update to this body, to ONS, to get your views. We'll then do public engagement on those options, so present the options to our residents, say these are the possibilities, this is what they would cost, these would be the environmental benefits, and get their views on those. We then go back and prepare the draft strategy with the lead member and the cross-party member working group. And once a draft strategy is prepared, bring that back to this group for review and comments. And then, so this would be towards the end of 2022, take it through executive for approval for a formal consultation on the draft strategy have a resident consultation on the strategy, and then go through the adoption process, which would go to executive. Next slide, please, Richard.
Could I just interrupt you a second there?
Yes, of course you can.
We don't actually have an ONS meeting in August. So you
Okay.
might want to revise that.
Excellent. Good. Thank you. Thank you. We'll take note of that. We'll just revise that step. Good. Okay, so the next two slides just outline the opportunities for residents to input into the process, and then the next one is for members to input. So there are 4 steps where we will ask residents for their input. This early engagement, and that is a survey, as I said, to understand resident priorities. Then we will get input from the Youth Council, so the young voices in our communities. We will also look to climate emergency, to a focus group to get the environmental view on the proposals. Step 3 will be the resident engagement on options, and step 4 will be the final formal consultation on the draft strategy. And next slide, please. So here we have the opportunities for members to input into the process. So I've divided that into 3 different layers, if you will. So overview and scrutiny has an opportunity to look at the process and overall objectives. That's tonight. Then we'll bring back the options to you, not in August because you're not meeting them, but at another date. And then the final opportunity for you to input when we bring the draft strategy back to you. In terms of the executive input, so the lead member will create the cross-party member working group and will chair that group, which will oversee the entire process. Towards the end of the process, the draft strategy will go to exec for approval to consult. And then the final stage of the process is that executive approves the final waste strategy. And then the cross-party member working group. So as mentioned above, that group will input throughout the process, and specifically they'll have the opportunity to review the options paper before that goes to a resident survey on options, and to review the draft strategy prior to it going back to yourselves to ONS and then out for the final consultation. So that's the process that we've drawn up. And now I just wanted to tell you a bit about the survey that we're planning to launch later this week. So this is just kind of showing you the look and feel of it. It is it's that piece of early engagement, starting to try and understand what's important to residents when we're writing and working on the waste strategy. So it explains the process. It goes through the steps for resident input into the creation of the strategy. It sets the context. It tells residents what's in our blue bags, that we have the 70% recycling rate target. And then it identifies the 3 key priorities that we have identified in creating the strategy. And those are the environmental benefits, the convenience to residents, and the cost to the council. And then it asks for their input. What do they think about those priorities? What's important to them? And it gives them the opportunity to tell us if they have other priorities when we're considering this, the strategy. It also asks residents how important they think it is to reduce the amount of waste we produce, and ask them what would help them reduce waste and recycle more. And then it asks, just in general, do they have any other views on it? So it gives them that opportunity to tell us anything else that they're considering when they think about waste and recycling and their collections. We then do, at the end of the survey, we do ask some specific questions about food waste. And that's really about, do you recycle your food waste? If not, why not? And those questions are they will feed into the waste strategy, but they're also part of a different piece of work that we'll be doing over the next year, and that is to try and increase the amount that our residents recycle. So to decrease the amount of food waste in the blue bags. And so we're just asking a few questions that will help us create that comms campaign over the next year. And I think that covers the survey and the process that we have outlined.
Could I make one comment on that last slide, the one on the right?
Yes, of course.
On that survey. If you could put it up again, please. you said there were 3 issues you were going to ask people about: environment, convenience, and you said cost to the council. I think sometimes residents think that we've got a bottomless pit of money that's all our own, and don't actually realise that it's their money. I wonder whether we could change the wording of that last one to say cost to you as a council taxpayer.
Yes, sorry, it doesn't actually say cost to the council, but I can make sure that that is clear in the survey, that it's the cost that residents do bear.
Yeah, that would be useful. Thank you. Right, any comments from anybody? Rachel and Paul and Sarah and Jim, Chris. Yeah, then you 2 last.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. I just had a couple of fairly quick questions, if I may. There's lots of mention about resident consultation here, which is very welcome. But how specific is the consultation? So are all the options sort of on the table for residents to comment on? So if they come up with things like things that they don't currently have, so, you know, dare I say, wheelie bins, curbside collection of glass, that kind of thing, are they going to be able to say, you know, those options, are they sort of on the table in terms of the consultation? Then the second question was about, in terms of the cost saving, I would have thought one of the key parts of a waste strategy would be our participation in RE3 and the provision of a waste recycling centre, but that's not really mentioned in here. Does that mean it's outside the scope of this strategy? And if so, why is that?
Which of you is answering, Richard?
I'm quite happy to do that if you like. Okay, so options on the table. Yeah, everything's on the table. We need to make sure that we've considered absolutely everything, including all aspects of and all comments from residents, just to make sure that we don't miss any opportunities. So that's that one. The other one is around HWRCs and participation, I think, within RE3. Yeah, that will play a part, absolutely, because waste just doesn't end with the collection. It also ends in disposal. So there will be a bit of work around the HWRCs and how we can link into them to make better use of the HWRCs, especially around reuse. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Richard and Rebecca, for your presentation. Very helpful, I think. Slide 3.2, you're talking about waste collected, 70,000 tonnes. Are WBC higher than neighbouring authorities on the total tonnage or per household? Again, on point 2, are the neighbouring authorities RE3, Reading and Bracknell, or all neighbouring authorities that border Woking and Borough, including South Oxfordshire and Basingstoke and Deane? Point 1 shows the RE3 authorities as a comparison. Do you think there's a link there between Reading and Bracknell having waste recycling centres in their authority area and Wokingham doesn't? And would that be an option in your questionnaire about a recycling centre within Wokingham? And some recent trends, there appears to have been a significant increase in glass recycling since lockdown. Supermarkets and other collection points always seem to be overflowing with glass. And again, since lockdown, online shopping has increased quite dramatically. Cardboard recycling has therefore gone up, and there seems to be a significant increase in the amount of cardboard overflowing at local supermarkets because people can't fit that inside the green sacks that we've got. Those are my points. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Fishwick on those. I'll do my best to answer those as I remember them, as it were. Okay, so the last point first around overflowing recycling banks, etc. So through our glass collection, we employ RE3 via FCC to collect glass from our curbside. There have been spikes in our glass collection, especially over the Euros and also COVID as well. and we've made adjustments to make sure that they are emptied as quickly as possible, and they're pretty good in terms of giving us that information. I think you're referring to the overflowing cardboard, etc., around some of the supermarket sites, especially around Sainsbury's, where they have Biffa as their own commercial collector to remove in the cardboard, etc. And I know they've been suffering a few resource problems, Biffa, which has led to overflows. So that's those points. You asked about household waste around Reading and also Bracknell. Are they and tonnages there? We generate more tonnage than them generally. We haven't looked at Basingstoke and Dean or South Oxfordshire. We've just taken the Berkshire authorities, but everything is fairly relevant in terms of those items. And then you talked about glass collection as a whole. And Stephen, I didn't know if you wanted to come in on anything.
Actually, no, the point was about the recycling sites, really. Just to, I think the question was about the amount of usage of the two sites, given that we haven't got one, and we'll be asking if the public would be interested in having one in our area. I mean, it is something that we're looking at. I've got a directors meeting tomorrow, RE3 directors meeting tomorrow, first thing tomorrow morning, and it's one of the things we'll be talking about. That we currently pay on patronage. At the moment, the surveys that have been carried out to date seem to indicate that Wokingham residents use those two sites more than Bracknell and Reading residents do. But recently they've introduced a booking system, which has given us a far more accurate picture of who's actually using those sites and when. So we're going to be recalculating what we pay for those sites. But I do think it's something we should be looking at to see if we can get this a site in our own area, and it would be an interesting thing to ask the public if it would be more convenient for them.
It would be quite helpful, I think, if we were able to include as part of that survey the additional cost of building our own centre, as opposed to what it costs us to use RE3, because I've no doubt it will be more to build one. It takes an awful lot of space, an awful lot of resource. Okay, Jim.
Sorry. Go.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, Richard.
Good evening, Councillor.
Sorry, Councillor tonight. I fully understand from the engagement with you and the team on various items now how hard you have to work, and I also understand the complexity of trying to deliver a strategy. My concern with this is that we're talking about a 14-month process before we get to a sign-off. In other words, we're probably talking 18 months or longer before we see any benefits. You have on the timeline here broad options available in December and January. If some of those broad options come out to be practical solutions, can I ask that we look at early implementation of some of these improvements if possible? And the second point is we're having lots of consultation with residents, which is absolutely right, and with councillors. What I don't see in this strategy is the recycling of other councils across the world on how they manage their waste. So rather than just restricting ourselves to what we know and what our neighbours know, can we widen it to what the world knows to see if there's anything that we can get that's innovative, and I'm struggling with my words now, and give Wokingham a real head start?
Those are two very good points there that you raise. Okay, so early implementation of options, yeah, absolutely, but certainly we don't stand still in waste. And the end of this year, beginning of next, we'll be focusing really heavily on food waste and reducing that as much as we possibly can, as well as driving our recycling services through the green waterproof reusable bags, which we rolled out this year. So we're actually pushing it as hard as we possibly can to get as much waste out of the blue bags and into more sustainable options, including RE3 and the HWRCs down there. The other point around best practice, I think you focused on that And absolutely, that is central to this mechanism and this process we've put in place. We will be seeking independent advice from the CIWM or the Chartered Institutes of Waste Management, as well as WRAP, the Waste and Resources Action Programme. We are not on our own here. We're not doing it on our own. We will be sharing best practice with other people, and they will be sharing it with us, because we have to make sure this is right. We have to make sure this is right for 2026 and beyond. This is the shot that we have to make sure is put in place, and for our residents as well.
Sarah.
Thank you very much, and evening, Richard and Rebecca. I've got 2 lines of inquiry, one for each of you. The first is just to go a little bit back over the scope again. I'd like to understand, and there was talk that Pauline mentioned about, do we look at another site in the borough instead of for the household waste? But I mean, are we looking beyond that? I mean, I know we send our waste off to, is it Oxfordshire, to an anaerobic digester. Is there scope maybe looking at expanding the RE3 provision to look at having something in the borough that we can charge out to for other authorities, so we're actually making an income from something like that? Also with the scope, does this include the collection of waste in public places that on land that the council owns? I'd like to understand more about the scope and not just what is curbside collection and how far that goes. The other line of inquiry is to do with the focus groups. I'd like to understand what kind of size we're talking about, how we're going to select people, the frequency, and actually really importantly, given this is deliberative, how the deliberative element is going to work, and the expert advice, so that residents are actually providing informed views. Obviously, a resident that understands that if you have curbside collection of glass, that actually reduces its recyclability rate, does that then change their view on what we should do, for example? So how, what expert resource are we going to use in that regard? Thank you.
Richard, you going first?
Thank you. I'll let Stephen pick up the household waste first, if you like, Stephen, and the HWRCs and the interdependencies there.
So the only one I really want to come in on, Richard, was the bit about the anaerobic digestion, because the DEFRA have asked if RE3 want any assistance to look at putting a anaerobic digestion system somewhere in our borough, because you're right, Councillor. Currently we take the food waste to Oxfordshire, which is clearly not sustainable, and we've put in a tentative expression of interest, as have Bracknell. So we thought we might as well keep this alive as a potential offer, and while we explore where we would put it and if it's at all even possible. The only other thing, just to mention briefly, of course, is the Environment Bill, which is going through at the moment. And just talking about glass collection, the government, of course, are looking at a deposit return scheme as part of the consultation on the Environment Bill. So that could affect the way we do things in the future. But we've had no response back as a result of that consultation. So we're waiting to hear back. But I'll Richard, unless there's anything else you wanted me to pick, I'm sure you pick the rest of those questions up.
Yes, thanks, Stephen, for that information. I think it's absolutely key. And just taking on that step further as well around about RE3 and what we're doing with our disposal aspects, and we'll be looking at that more in depth at the moment and continue to do so to make sure that we get the best practice available and also value for money around those. Councillor Kerr, would you mind just giving a bit more information in regards to collection of waste in public places, and what does that entail from your point of view?
As in public waste bins. So does the scope of what you're looking at here include collection of waste in public places rather than just curbside and glass recycling and the household sites?
Okay, I think it's all fairly independent, to be honest with you, and there are synergies between them. So litter bins, recycling, we will be looking at. We leave no stone unturned within this waste strategy just to make sure we get things right. You also asked about independent advice and how that's going to be integrated, and that's going to be a formal system by introducing or involving collection companies and experts, such as, a contractor at the moment, Veolia. As I said, the CIWN and RAP will be involved in that as well. And their information will be fed back into focus groups, and also the member working group, which Councillor Bath will actually pick up and set up. And what I'm going to do is just hand back to Rebecca in regards to those questions around focus groups and sizes and what they mean.
Yep, I can cover that. So the focus group, so the climate emergency focus group, that is actually part of the climate emergency action plan. So we'll be following the process that they outline for the deliberative process. In terms of helping our residents make informed decisions. So that's part of the engagement program that we have set up, that we've got the 3 different stages. The beginning is just that early understanding, what are people's general views. The middle is giving them the information. So these are the options. This is, if we were to do curbside glass recycling, it would have this impact on cost and this impact on our collections, this impact on our recycling rates, et cetera. So it's giving people that layer of information that I think that is what you're looking for, so that they can give us that detailed look at what is important to them when they really understand the big picture. And then that final stage of engagement is looking at what we actually think is the right strategy for the council and for our residents, and then getting their views on that.
Thank you. The size, selection and frequency of these focus groups, I've not seen anything about that yet. It's not come to us. Do you know how that's going to be done?
No, sorry. It's part of the climate emergency action plan. So we'll be directed by them. We'll do separately a focus group with the youth council or engagement with the youth council on that. But on the climate emergency focus group, we'll be guided by their process.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that it's important that everybody is given the details of the consequences of their decisions. Thank you. Anybody got anything to add on those questions? In which case I'll move to Chris.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'm a little confused on the process to get there. The last entry referring to the waste strategy. Is this a waste collection strategy or waste disposal strategy, or is it both? Just to clarify that. I guess we have more travelling time and distance than Reading and Bracknell do, because we haven't got a waste disposal site. But that might explain why our figures are a little higher in on the second page in your first panel. So, I mean, I entirely agree with Paul, and I think someone else mentioned it. We do certainly need to consider having a new site in Woking Borough. On the third slide there, it says, rather strangely, weak collections of rubbish and recycling limited to 80 bags per property. Recycling's not limited at all, of course. So I'm not quite sure why that's there. I think, sorry, slightly echoing again a point that Jim made about 2026 is a long way off. We are in a contract till then, but what can we do with Veolia to deal with this current trajectory, which is not sustainable in the long term? I mean, it's 1.5 years away. It's quite a long time, isn't it? What can we do under the terms of the current contract? And the last point was the second entry in the process to get there. It says input from the Youth Council. Why particularly the Youth Council? Thank you.
Councillor, thank you very much for those questions. Okay, so first question is around collection strategy versus disposal, etc. So yeah, primarily it's going to be looking at collection, but it depends on what the working group want to do as part of this. And that also goes back to the previous points around public places as well, and that's what they are going to determine what the strategy is going to look at in more detail. So we have to wait for that point to be considered. What can we do before 2026 then? Absolutely, we can't stand still, and we're going to be working closely with Veolia to reduce the amount of waste that's actually produced. We're going to do an educated comms campaign, and we're also going to be pushing that forward even further in the next couple of years, as well as working with other local authorities to drive our recycling rate as much as possible and minimising our waste through initiatives such as home composting, say, and boosting rural nappies. I think those are the main 2 points there. Councillor, is there anything else I've missed?
It was just the youth council.
Oh, the youth council. Yeah. Rebecca,
Would you like me to do that one?
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Yep. So the Youth Council is something that it's newly created. It consists of 38 students aged 11 to 17 from schools all across the borough, and it offers young people a voice as well as a platform to debate issues that matter to them and challenge or guide us as a council on our strategies and plans. So they've recently launched, they've had, I believe, 2 meetings, and are willing to give us their views on what's important as we look at our waste strategy.
Thank you. And Jackie. Jackie or Rebecca, I don't mind, which one of you wants to go first? Rebecca then.
Sorry, I was just helping Jackie then because I wasn't sure she heard you. Apologies. Sorry, one of the questions I wanted to ask was your strategy about dealing with people that are not interested. So it's one of my biggest frustrations. You're preaching here really to the converted, I'm sure. My waste is minimal. I recycle, I use the food waste. But the big issue is what you're saying here is the people that don't. And my concern about all of this is the people that you will get involved with are the people that are already the converted, that are interested. So how are you actually going to engage with those people that are not doing it? The ones that then complain on Facebook because their blue bag's been ripped apart because it was full of chicken bones. How are you going to really work with those people? What's your strategy?
Good point. Stephen or Richard?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and there will be a minimal amount of people that don't want to know, don't get it, and those are the people that we really want to focus on, and we do that for a variety of means. That could involve, door knocking. That could involve a bit more intricate information in terms of how to recycle, and a bit more targeting on that. Rebecca, anything else you want to add?
Yes. Yep. So we have a variety of different ways of reaching out into the community. Obviously, we do the usual that we do with all of our news. We do media releases, articles, newsletters that sent out to a good portion of residents in the borough, social media, etc. But we do have other ways to try and reach the people that are not generally engaged. And that includes reaching out to different partners in the voluntary sector and asking them to help us reach populations that we don't generally reach into. We often do things, put up posters and signs in the libraries. We have depending on what piece of work and what stage it's at, we also do have done pop-ups, etc. So we do have a variety of ways. We are always looking to expand those ways and reach deeper into the community. We have a new engagement platform that will be launching this week along with the waste strategy. So you'll see that coming to you on Wednesday this week. And that we're hoping that helps us reach further into the community. It should certainly reach further into young people because it's a more engaging digital platform. And then parallel to that, we will have offline engagement, reaching people that are not generally online.
Would I just be able to come back on that? Sorry.
Of course, yeah.
So one thing I've noticed, I actually help an elderly person down the road who is physically unable to move their recycling, and luckily she has people that will help her next door move her rubbish. So I think there's quite a few things to consider. I think the young people are actually already converted. They're the ones already telling us what we should be doing. And I think there are other communities maybe that we could be looking at, because there are some general issues, you know, with people that can't lift the heavy green, that they're great. I love the green sacks, don't get me wrong, but there are some people that can't manage them because of the intricate detail. And I think there are maybe some groups that we could be looking at.
We do have a list of groups that we work with when we're doing consultations like this, engagement like this, and they do include organizations like Link and the other organizations that reach into people that have mobility issues, the elderly, etc. And I think I'm guessing Stephen's going to talk about, we do provide a service to residents that are have physical difficulties with their waste and recycling.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I know you answered it perfectly. I was going to say as well, obviously, we will talk to the Youth Council, but there are others. You're absolutely right, Councillor. There are disabled groups, etc. we need to be talking to. Their input will be absolutely key. But just on the issue about the people that trying to reach the people that actually don't care, the Youth Council will really help with that, won't it? And getting into schools will help with that. We know, don't we, that that kind of upward peer pressure from kids to their parents is really, really important. And then just on the question that was asked last time about, is there anything we can do before 2026? We're already talking to Veolia about potential changes to the contract that might help us save money, keep costs down between now and 2026. We're looking at, they're made offers to help us with some of the comms around trying to get more and more people to take up garden waste collections, for example, which would help us take waste out of the waste stream and cut our costs, etc. So we are not going to sit there till 2026 and not do anything. We absolutely are going to change anything we can between now and then and take costs out and move ourselves forward as far as the strategy is concerned. And I think the question was as well about, is this about collection or disposal? Unfortunately, they are interlinked. You can't have a collection strategy that doesn't fit the disposal options. So one of the other things we're doing in parallel with this is talking to RE3 about what some of our disposal options might be moving forward. And as I said earlier as well, we've also got the Environment Bill, which is another background piece of information. For example, the government as well are looking to make councils have to provide garden waste collections for free. That's something they consulted on. Again, as I said, we haven't heard the results of that consultation, but all of these things will have an impact, and we have to look at all of them at the same time before we come up with a cohesive strategy in 2023.
It is worth reiterating that for elderly or disabled people, they don't have to take their things to the curbside, but if they contact the council, then the collectors will come up to their back door or wherever and pick it up for them. Jackie, the last person. You take your mask off, please. Put your microphone on.
So, Pauline, sorry, Jackie's struggling because she can't hear. She's got a problem with.
My hearing aids up. Oh, right. I understand the problem.
Sorry,
So
yeah.
I'm a little bit can't hear. Have you got a question? No, I haven't got a question. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Is there anything else, Sarah?
It's just a quick one. On the forward plan for this committee, we've got the waste strategy coming next month as well. And that wasn't in the timeline in the presentation. What is it you're going to be presenting to us, and what are we going to have the opportunity to input into next month, please?
Rebecca?
I can answer that.
Okay.
I think, yeah, thank you, Councillor. Sorry, all three of us were poised there. Okay, so we had 2 bites of cherry in terms of tonight as well as in November. But the key priority for us now is to actually start the ball rolling. We want the working party set up, and once that's done, then we will come back. So we might have to leave November's until I think there's one in December or January. January. Okay, let's bring this back again with an update for you in January, and we will outline our progress to date and also, you know, the next phases, and also steer from the committee on that point, if that's all right with the chair.
Of course.
Yeah, it's quite a full agenda in January, but I'm sure Neil can sort it out. Can I just make one little thought, and it just comes back on what Rebecca was saying. We also have some roads in the borough that a full-size vehicle can't go down, and we have the small vehicles, and they don't have currently the lift facility, which means they can't have the proper garden waste bins. I think a lot of these roads, certainly I have one in my ward, have a lot of elderly people that then can't lift the garden waste sacks, and they've managed to get these garden waste bins, but they have to take them to a completely different place to be collected. It's my request is, can we please look at small lorries that also have tail lifts, please? Basically, is what I'm requesting.
Okay, well, what we'll have to do is just have a look at what the member group wants to look at. So let's then decide on that front, and then we'll go from there, if that's all right, Councillor.
That's right. I just want it on the record that it's something for consideration, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. So really, this was just an outline of the way forward, and there have been some interesting points raised. So are you happy with that, Richard?
That's brilliant. And once again, thank you very much, the Chair and members of the committee, for inviting us here tonight, and look forward to come back in January if we can.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
All right. Now then, we move to agenda item 40, the website improvement. It's interesting that our vision at the beginning of all of the agenda contained the word that we'll be relentlessly customer focused. Well, I feel that our website has not necessarily been like that over the years. This is an opportunity to see how it can be improved, both its design and its structure. And pages 71 to 77 have a number of suggestions that have been made. And this is our opportunity really to see whether we've got any further objections. So I have pleasure in handing over to Gregor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Chair, I would echo your thoughts in terms of relentlessly serving our residents. Our website, as it currently stands, doesn't particularly do that. I think the plan that we're putting forward here today is to talk about how we're going to improve that website. And the simple reality is our website needs to be replaced. There are a number of reasons why it needs to be replaced. And so the purpose of this paper is firstly to talk about why it is that it needs to be replaced, and then secondly to understand your views on how it can be improved. So let's start with why it needs to be replaced. Well, first of all, we exist to provide the best services to our residents, and at the moment our website doesn't do that. And a lot of that is because the way that our website is used has changed quite dramatically. COVID in itself has pushed a lot more people online because they haven't necessarily been able to come in to the council and visit us. A lot more people are using our website as their first point of contact with WBC, and are trying to find information so they don't have to contact us in other ways. The website platform that exists at the moment is also reaching the end of its lifespan. It's a relatively old platform in terms of tech. There is new platforms, new technology that is available that we can utilize that can give us a much better look, much more usability, and a much more friendly front end to our residents. The council's website currently supports over 1,500 pages of information and different sites. It also hosts 6 different microsites on behalf of organisations like the Dinter Pastures Activity Centre. And because of the weight of information that it's contained, and there's a lot of PDF documents saved on it that are accessible to our residents, it becomes quite slow at times. It can become very, very slow to download pieces of information. And so we need to create a system that is going to be able to host information, the information that our residents want, in a much more agile way. The other thing to remember is that the way that our residents are using our website is very, very different to how it used to be. Even only a few years ago, only 25% of access to our website was through a mobile. Now it's over 50%. The way that our residents are using our platform is changing, and therefore we have to change and adapt and build to a much more mobile, agile platform. Our website currently sees about 1.7 million visits a year, with an average of about 3 pages per trip in terms of the visits. Now, we provide a very good functional website at the moment in terms of ratings versus similar authorities, we rate about number 5 out of 40, which is a really great place to be. But when you look at some of the usability stats that come through from the GovMetrics customer satisfaction information that we now have access to, our residents don't feel that our website provides as good a service as some of the other communication channels that we have available to us. So what we want to do is take a lot of that information that our customers are giving, our residents are giving us through GovMetrics and through other analysis, and really put in place a website that becomes a lot more accessible, a lot easier for our residents to use, and allows them to do things in a much more straightforward way. So take, for example, COVID has advanced the number of our residents that want to complete forms online rather than coming in or phoning up. So we need to be able to provide a platform that allows residents to be able to complete those forms easily and accessibly. We want to improve the user experience. We want to make our website much more easy to navigate, especially for those most common uses. And I think at the back of this document that you've been given, it lists the most common web searches that are done for both Woking Borough Council, but also on our website. And they make up a huge percentage of the total number of uses of our website every single year. I think it's about 38% of total website uses come from just those top 10 searches. How are we going to go about improving our website? Well, Woking Borough Council was one of the very early adopters of the local digital declaration. We signed it at the end of the end of November 2018. It was launched in August 2018. So we were a very early adopter of that. And what that declaration does is it commits us to building services around the needs of our users online, to use technology that is easily reusable and that joins up with other technologies. So we've talked about the new engagement system, the software that's going to be launched in the coming days as part of the waste consultation. So this new website should be able to link up with the Woking Borough Engage platform. And it needs to be safe and secure. So residents need to know that any information that they share with us is going to be protected and isn't going to be easily accessible. And similarly, any information that we put in the opposite direction isn't going to be easily accessed by people that don't need to access it. So we're going to use the customer satisfaction results. We're going to use analytics. We're going to use end user testing, and we're going to create a much better platform. The budget for this has already been included in the MTFP for next year and the year after. And basically what we're trying to do is create a much more modern look, create it mobile friendly and mobile first, make it easier to navigate, put in some consistent signposting, particularly for those most commonly used, most commonly searched for terms, reduce the number of PDFs that are on it, simplify our content and simplify the voice in which we present information to our residents, make things like forms a lot easier to use and make sure that they've been tested to be accessible, and then link it to that Engage platform as well. I hope that the members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee can support this action. It really is a positive step, and Chair, you yourself have pointed out that our website isn't necessarily the most user-friendly at the moment, and that is exactly what we're trying to create as part of this piece of work.
Thank you very much. Right, comments, and please, Norman, Sarah, Michael and Jim, and then Chris. Norman.
Thank you. It's interesting to see that we're ranked number 5 out of 40. I just wonder how that ranking was arrived at, what sort of things they took into account, and also the fact that our customer satisfaction rate is at 57%. Do we know what the ones above us were? I'm therefore thinking, what's the range of expectations for this? I doubt that we're ever going to get a score of 99% because people just won't rate us in that way. So I just wonder what's a realistic improvement that we think we're going to achieve out of this exercise. Thank you.
Gregor?
From my perspective, I'll give you my view, and then I'll ask Nicholas Spencer, who is on the line as well, to come in and answer the specifics. Norman, you're absolutely right. We're never going to get to 100% user satisfaction. We should never particularly aim to get to 100% user satisfaction. There'll always be opportunities for us to improve. There'll always be opportunities for us to iterate and get better. And also new technology will also always be coming along, which means that we need to update, to refresh and find new opportunities to engage with our residents. Like I said, in terms of the specific questions you've answered, I'll hand over to Nicholas, who hopefully will have the answer.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chair and the committee. Thanks very much for your time. So I think the first question was, we are ranked 5 out of 40, and what is behind that ranking? So we are now a member of GovMetrics, which is a customer satisfaction system, and there are 39 other councils at the moment using the same system, and it is simply that when you look at the web satisfaction ratings, we are the 5th best out of the 40 using that service at the moment. So our site, although we completely acknowledge needs improving and is not as user friendly as we would like it to be, and we really want to do something good with it, what we're finding is it's still better than 34 others using the same ranking service. And I guess what they're looking for when they look at that is the amount of feedback that comes in that's negative or positive based on the rating system of the smiley faces, which I think you can see on our website at the moment. So that will be a kind of statistical measurement. That will also be what gives us the 57% rating. And you're right, I'm very heartened to hear everyone acknowledge 99% or 100% is something that is unachievable. But I think we have to do more research into what we think good looks like. And at the moment, what the 4 authorities better than us are scoring. My understanding is it's somewhere up to 65%, but we want to look into that. And I think it would be a key benchmarking KPI to measure improvement when we move forward. So we need to be transparent about that and make sure people can see what we're suggesting and agree with it.
Okay, Norman.
Yes, thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I fully support the need to have a new website. Don't dispute that at all, I'm afraid. And sometimes I can find things, other times I have to go direct to offices because I just can't find what I need, I'm afraid. One of my questions was going to be around what does success look like? How do we know if we've achieved our objectives? So if that is something that's in development, maybe that's something that could come back to this committee, where obviously we look at the KPIs quarterly for through this committee, and we're looking obviously at the development of KPIs as well. So if that could be part of that, I think that'd be really useful, please. The other part of this was to seek some views on specific planned improvements. So just a few suggestions, if I may. The mobile app isn't really an app. It's basically just the website, and I've tried to use it like for using it for reporting things. If I'm out and I see a pothole or an issue, I want to be able to do it there and then. I'm not going to remember when I get to my destination. And sometimes I actually give up doing it because it takes 3 or 4 attempts and it just fails every time. So there's a real problem there. And we are reliant on our residents reporting a lot of these things. So there needs to be a proper mobile app. While I'm on the reporting tool, there's 2 things I want to bring up there. I understand there are 2 different systems being used, HIMS and the other one, whatever it's called. And sometimes they don't always link up. And so things are missed. So some kind of coordination in the background there to make sure reports don't get lost. There are issues there. And if we want to encourage people to use the system, it needs to work every time. But there's nowhere for suggestions either. So a lot of that reporting thing is based on the negative rather than the positive. And I think we need to have that in there as well. A lot of the content online is way too technical. And there needs to be information that is user friendly. So what was it, 123-page TRO on parking charges? Sorry, but I don't get it. It needs to be user friendly. And I use the library service quite a lot. And I'm not sure how this relates to other parts of the services that we offer, but when it comes to signing up for events, some of them you have to email, sometimes you have like a form you have to download and scan in. Can we not just have easy sign up for the services that we offer? There's no consistency across the different services that we offer, and I'm using the library as an example. So those are just some thoughts about things that can go in there. Thank you.
if I could just add, we used to have a plain English policy on this council. Maybe that policy's gone in a drawer somewhere. Any comments, Nick or Gregor?
So I would say thank you very much for all that feedback. I think all those areas are things that we need to think about. I think how different systems link together is definitely something that is on our roadmap and in our thinking. And I think it's something in the emerging digital and technology strategy that we make reference to as well. And I think consistency is absolutely key, and ease of use is absolutely key. With respect to the app, that is absolutely correct, that at the moment it's basically just an interface to some web pages that are selected. So we need to think hard about that, and I think we need to talk about to customers about how they want to access our services and how we can make it easy for them. And that's kind of a big part, I think, of what we want to be doing before we start implementing and procuring the new system, is getting out there and not just testing on what we've got, but asking people what they actually want.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and I would also say I could not agree more on how the content is written. And I know Jackie's here, Jackie Whitney, with us today, and we are thinking across the board about the way that we use language to make things easy for people to understand when we communicate with our customers.
Yeah, and language that's non-technical and that ordinary residents understand, not those who are involved in the council.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Very informative presentation there, and the questions have been good so far. But I've just really got one question actually, and it's to do with the process of migrating the 1500 existing pages over to the corporate voice. I just wonder what that process is going to look like, what it will be, perhaps how long it will take as well, and will it have any effect on the performance of the actual website itself? Will it slow it down? Hopefully make it quicker, I hope.
Yeah, it's a really great question, Michael. It's one that I asked Nick and Sally when they first started presenting this plan to me as well, because 1500 pages could quite easily take one person, a few years to migrate over to a new corporate voice. The simple answer to it is that there are a number of web pages that are used most frequently. We've got the list of them. They're published in the back of the document here. You can see them for yourself. Council tax, planning applications, garden waste collection days, things like that. Those ones will be the priority to be migrated over. For the rest, we'll do them in priority order, so the order in which they are most commonly used. It'll be an interesting opportunity for us actually, because with 1500 pages, we need to have a look and see whether or not we need to keep some of them, or whether it'd be worth setting up an archive for some of these website pages as well, that people can request the information from them, but aren't necessarily part of our core website and available every single day, 24/7. So yes, there will be a process for determining how things get transferred across. We will be looking at every page in isolation and trying to understand whether it's worth keeping, whether there's information on it that is best put into the public domain in a different voice, or whether it's worth having in the first place as well. The idea is that it should be seamless. So actually each new page section of the website, as it migrates over to the new website, will be beta tested. Residents will be given the opportunity to test the beta for us. And then if it works and there's no sort of glaring errors in it, if there's no functionality breakdown in it, then those pages will migrate across to the new system, and then we'll move on to the next area and the next area and the area after that. Nick, do you want to add?
I would just say, yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea of delivering the new site in an iterative nature allows us to kind of concentrate on the things that we know are used most and improve them, and then improve bit by bit as we go along. And I would hope we would reduce the content on the website significantly as part of that process, while we work out what customers really need from us, and where perhaps signposting them to other ways of getting information from us is more effective and efficient for them anyway. I think at the moment, we need to look at the content on the site and think about what are the key things that we need to tell people easily, and where do we need to point them to more specialist information that is going to be beneficial from some kind of different contact with us anyway.
Jim.
Sorry, Gregor. Nick, caught me hearing aid. I won't be able to hear you otherwise. Bloody mask. I personally, I think, and I think you know this is one of the most important things we're doing as a council. However, a website is just one of our customer contact channels. So it would be good if in the future you come back and show us how this fits in. I know Jackie's doing a lot of work on this into the wider contact strategy, because if people fall off of the web, we need to have them into a person, or if they come face to face and we need to direct them back. All of that contact strategy would be good to understand better. A website is also a window into our technical suite. So I'd like to understand at some point in the future how the improvements we're making to the website are going to be either restricted or cause additional costs into our existing technical suite, because you can't integrate into systems that don't want to talk to you. I think there's a number of strategies that also need some definition with this: content, design strategy, infrastructure strategy, and integration strategy. I think, again, at some point in the future, in plain English, it would be good to understand how all this is going to fit together. You've touched on this, but I'll still raise it anyway. Searching online is difficult. So having a search and archiving strategy, so we can get rid of some of the 1,500 pages that currently are there and make the whole thing a lot more seamless, would be really good. The thing for me is, with plain English, is that it should be a consistency. It's no good putting plain English on a website if everything we write or we put out in communications elsewhere is still full of the gobbledygook. It has to be consistent. If we're going to talk as a council, we should talk consistently as a council across all of our channels. And finally, the blue badge improvements, and they were some very quick improvements, 60% increase in digital take-up. That's a big, big prize to get if we get the rest of it right. So keep up the good work, guys.
Thank you, Jim. Chris.
Thank you for that, Jim. If I just very quickly come back on one of the things that you said there, Jim, about this being part of the sort of front end of our voice to our residents. You're absolutely right, and Jackie Whitney has been doing a fantastic job of understanding the voice of our residents and customer journey mapping, how residents come to us, what they're coming to us for, and how good we are at really understanding their issues, their queries, their questions, and then resolving them. And GovMetrics as a suite of reporting information has been really helpful in helping us understand where they're happy with that service, where they're not happy with that service, and why they're not happy with that service. So I think you're absolutely right. This is just one part of a much bigger piece of sort of front end communication two-way with our residents. And I think there is more to come. There are other strategies that you've referenced, and I agree with you. There's more work for us to do, particularly around that one consistent voice to our residents. I think we have gotten better at that over the last couple of years. Dave Allen and his team are really bringing the different departments together and making sure that they speak externally with a very consistent voice. And COVID and the communications that we had to put out as part of COVID, where we needed to make sure that we were the one voice of authority within our borough, helped really focus that voice as well. But there is still more work to be done. We carry on doing it, and we appreciate the feedback from meetings like this in terms of how we're progressing.
Thank you. And Kristen.
Thank you. The plain English has struck a chord tonight. I entirely agree with that. It is worth noting, though, that some documents, for instance, the TRO, do have an element of legalese in them. They do have to be precise, and so sometimes it's not possible to have everything in absolute plain English. My main concern with the website at the moment is really the content, but it's the very clunky interface. which is critical. So it takes a lot of mouse clicks to get to places. Just to read the agenda for this meeting, I think it's about 5 clicks. It's asking you questions which you never really want to see. And to that extent, it might be possible to personalize menu systems. So you log on as yourself, things you're most interested in get priority when they're displayed to you. But this is going to take 18 to 24 months to develop. I'm a bit concerned that we might, with best intentions, not come up with quite the right interface. So I wonder whether you could consider periodically producing prototypes, cut down versions of the website for whoever you want to look at it, to look at it. Maybe eventually running in parallel with the old system and then switch over. But I think we need to see the new interface, the menu system, a long way before we get to the final release. Thank you.
Gregor or
And Nicholas, I'll let you respond to.
No problem. Thank you. That is absolutely the plan. Thank you, because that is absolutely the plan. Is that what we're doing? It will take 18 to 24 months to migrate the entire site to a new system, but what we're doing by making the delivery phased or iterative is getting and starting with the most used areas of the site, is getting it live and to people as soon as possible, so we can start getting that feedback from them and seeing what they think of the new interface and where it can be improved as we kind of work along the journey. And the idea would be that we release more iterations of the site, add more to it as we go along, while running the old site alongside it and things disappearing from the old site. So that is absolutely the plan. And when we talk about beta, that is a term, I guess, that is used now to denote that this is not the finished product, but we want to get it to you as soon as we can, so we can see how you're using it and what you think of it, and we can refine it and make it better from how you're finding it in real life, rather than holding it all back until we think it's perfect and then getting it out there.
Sorry, Rochelle, I didn't realise your hand was up. Thank you.
One thing, I was just looking at the same website on my phone and my tablet. On the tablet, it's reasonably easy to read. On the phone, it's rather difficult. It does help you, help Specsavers probably, because it is rather difficult to read using Blueprint, among other things, which is probably black and white is better usually than blue and white. But that's my eye doctor standpoint, so I can say that much. It's just, those are the kind of things that somebody didn't look at when they were doing this. These people are using these things.
Yeah.
And unless you're a very young person, you're probably going to need
magnifying glass.
Yeah, something like that to read some of these. On my tablet, it's fine, but it's just too small a print for the amount of information you have. It's very hard to follow something with that much print. It may be needed to be that way, but it should be a synopsis at some point saying this is what we're trying to say here, make it a little easier. In all medical journals, you have about 2 paragraphs at the top that tell you exactly what the heck they're talking about, and then you go into more detail. It would be very useful to have like a very short, snappy, this is what we're doing, a consultation on X. The traffic regulation of order is looking at these 3 streets, and it's going to start not allowing parking there from 5 a.m. till 3 a.m. or something like this. Just to give you a short version of it, so then you can look at more detail if you want. But most people are looking for the short version. Who's doing the TRO on my street? What is it going to affect me?
Good point. Thank you very much. Okay, any comments, or are you happy to take that on board?
I think I'm more than happy to take that piece of feedback on board, Rochelle, particularly about the synopsis, and that is something that has been discussed already, both myself and Nicholas and Sally, but also myself with Dave Allen. To your point on why it works on your tablet and not on your phone, the simple reality is your tablet is showing you what you would see on a PC, on a laptop, on a desktop. which is what our website was designed for. I said right at the outset, it was not designed for a mobile phone, but now 50% of our website users are on a mobile. I will put my hand up and say a lot of them are me looking for agendas for the meetings that I'm about to go to and finding out what time my meetings are meant to start at while I'm walking down the street. But, we have to accept that, particularly as a result of COVID, the way that people are interacting with us as a council and the way that people are interacting with our website as that first point of contact have changed massively, and we need to adapt to it. Hence the point of doing this piece of work and making sure that it is budgeted as part of the MTFP to make sure that we can do it properly and not start it and then never really finish it.
Thank you. And I've got one final question. Obviously, we as councillors use the website a great deal. We've had the opportunity tonight to feed ideas in, but how would the other council members manage to feed in ideas on what they think could improve the website, and who would they do it to? Could there be some means of involving all council members in this?
There certainly can be. We can definitely do that, Nicholas. Sally and I can take that as an action to gather the feedback and the thoughts of all of the different councillors in terms of what changes they would like to make to the website. Certainly, I as a councillor use specific pages very frequently, and really my access of the other 1,480 pages is very limited. So really, I just want to see a few key pages. But yeah, there's absolutely the opportunity that the councillors and others can feed into how this website will be created going forward.
Thank you very much. Right, we have a recommendation on page 69, which reads that we review the report and support the replacement of the website system as a fundamental part of the strategic direction. And because I believe in action, not just words, I would like to amend number 2 so that it reads, to ask the executive member and officers to note the committee's views on the specific planned improvements. Thank you, Sarah, if you're seconding that. So can I see those in favour? Thank you. I think that's unanimous. And thank you very much indeed for your input this evening. That was really helpful, and it's long overdue. So good luck. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Right, then we'll now move to the task and finish group on climate emergency, which is on page 79. There are 4 parts to the recommendation: to consider the officer response, to consider progress against the task and finish recommendations, to note the next update report is in January, and to consider any specific issues that we'd like to see included in the report. I'm going to take 1, 2, and 4 separately. We don't really need to do 3 because by looking at it, we're noting it. So first of all, the officer's response on pages 84 and following, which is, to my mind, fairly positive. I've got one question under behaviour change, but has anybody got anything else they want to ask? Rachel, Alison, Paul, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just focus on the transport section, really, because I think it seems to me, reading it through, that the responses don't seem to be sort of taken quite as seriously in this section as some of the others. And obviously transport is absolutely key to our strategy. So just to give some examples, so point 3, the recommendation from the task and finish group was to undertake a borough-wide journey needs assessment. So I'd like to know why this hasn't been done, isn't being done, why there's no plans for that journey needs assessment. And then similarly, another point, that point 4 about petrol and diesel cars. So we've got this target of 50% of new registered vehicles to be electric when, the government have already said that it has to be 100% by 2030. So I don't understand why that's not sort of been corrected as was the recommendation. So I think overall I'd like a response on those 2 points, but I'd sort of note that it seemed to me like the transport responses were more disappointing than in some of the other sections.
Comments from the officers or from Gregor, either of you?
Well, we actually have Andy Glencross joined us live from what looks like the beach somewhere. So I will let Andy on.
Hello, Andy.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, Rachel, I think on the 2 points you raise, on point 3, I think that there's not really a process like that. We will do that process in terms of planning for the journeys going forward as part of our local transport plan update. That is something that is following reasonably soon after the local plan, in terms of, before we do a sort of local transport needs assessment, we need to know where the growth agendas are coming so that we can factor that in. So that will come forward. But at the moment, what we're focusing on is sustainable transport journeys, and we have just started that process of pulling together our local cycling and walking implementation plan, which has included looking at the major route for pedestrian and cycling transport. Does that help with that?
Could I just briefly come back? So the journey needs assessment will be done. It's just not happening yet.
I think
so. Can that be reflected in the responses?
Yeah, I think that it will be picked up as part of the local transport plan. That's what I would say, I suppose, if I was going to add anything to the response.
Okay, thank you. And was there a comment about the petrol and diesel cars, the 50% figure?
Yeah. Well, my understanding of the government's position is that they want to remove petrol and diesel cars for new sales by 2030. There will be still non-petrol and diesel cars on the road after 2030. So
that was my understanding as well, Rachel. Otherwise, we'll all be dumping our cars and buying new ones. But I think Andy is right on that.
Can I just be clear then, in the plan, that does refer to new registrations, doesn't it? Not all cars.
It does, yes. Yeah. It maybe could be made a little bit clearer.
Yeah, so it should be 100%. I don't understand why it's still 50%. If the government are mandating that it's going to be 100%. 100%
of new cars.
Yeah, but this is targeting achieving 50% registered EVs in the boroughs. That's new and old cars.
Right. Okay.
So there will be there still will be some old cars that aren't sold after 2030 in the borough active. That's why it's 50% not 100%. Does that make sense?
Yeah, my understanding was from previous meetings that it was the 50% figure and the carbon savings associated with it was relating to new registered vehicles, not all vehicles. So perhaps that could be checked, because I'm not sure the carbon savings would be right if that's the case.
Okay, thank you. Alison.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to turn to page 87, which is within Homes, part 1, and the last paragraph, where an alternative interim suggestion of a policy statement, it says the alternative could be to produce this. So is this something we are going to do? I'd just like a bit more definition from the officers, please.
Matter of tense, I think. You're muted.
Diana, you're on mute.
You're muted.
Sorry, good evening. Hi, everyone. So at this stage, the council cannot produce an SPD until the local plan update process is completed. But what the officers think they can do is to produce an interim policy that will encourage new developers to consider net zero carbon alternatives. So it's something we can do.
Yes, I completely understand that. I want to know, is it something we are doing? You know, I want to see that we are going to do it. You could tell me all sorts of things that we could do, but I want to know what we are going to do, please.
It is, as I said, a matter of tense of the verb.
Yeah.
So can we have some reassurance on that?
So I believe the answer is yes, is something we will do.
Are you happy with that, Alison?
I'm delighted. Thank you very much, Diane.
Thank you.
Diana, sorry.
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Mine's also related to the transport ones. On page 84, little I, the low carbon transport strategy. It's not just about low carbon, it's about lowering all emissions, as per the motion which this council passed in September 2019, which reduces the impacts on climate change and poor air quality at the same time. Little 2, 60% of car journeys are up to 5 kilometres, and the vast majority of residents live within 5 kilometre radius of the geographic centre of this borough. So easy to cycle distance, provided that a good quality cycle infrastructure has been installed, and therefore giving residents a choice and reducing the need to travel by car. And that by default will actually create a capacity on the network. Again, on page 84, little 3, developing the LC WIP is one thing, but delivery is another. And do you know what any high level costs are of delivering that on priority routes, secondary routes, and so on? Little 4 and the ban on sale of petrol diesel cars. Yes, it is new. It is new ones from 2030. But an average life of a car is about 13.5 years. So anything sold in the latter part of the 2020s will still be running in the 2040s. Something to take account of. And little 6, it says existing WBC guidance is robust. The problem that I have with my sustainable transport hat on is generally what's been delivered so far overall is poorish quality, and it hasn't really attracted new cyclists. And then finally, little 8, you mentioned Twyford, but you haven't mentioned Wokingham Town Centre. Thank you.
Who's going to come back on that? Andy?
Mute. I'm on mute, sorry. Yeah, I'll start on that one. Sorry, if I'm wrong, Paul, you come back to me, but I only heard, I think, 2 questions in there. One was around LC WIP costs, and yes, we'll be looking at high level costs for delivering the LC WIP as we work our way through that draft document. As you know, we're out consultation at the moment, and we've just done some work about actually looking at the key cycling and walking routes across the borough. In fact, the guys in my team were, I believe, cycling them all last week, just to make sure they picked up all of the barriers. So yeah, I'd expect that to come forward in due course. The Wokingham Town Centre one, I don't know whether we're looking at a clean air zone, but I know we have things in mind to address Wokingham Town Centre air quality issues. But I'm not so close to the air quality side of things. I wonder whether Diana knows a bit more about it.
No, I believe it's, I mean, I know the officers agreed to explore the potential of introducing clean air zones. So it must be that, I mean, it will be also in Wokingham Town Centre, it's just not included in the answer.
Yeah, I think we'll take that away and come back to you on that.
Yeah, that would be useful. Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you very much. I just want to pick up quickly on the clean air zone thing. As the member of the Task and Finish group that asked for that specifically to be in there, I'm very conscious this is about carbon emissions and not air pollution. But the reason for putting in clean air zones is because obviously the air pollution that's generated in there is what is breathed in by the same people, and it's much easier to articulate any improvements and measures from an air pollution perspective, but it also has the same effect on carbon reduction. So that's why that's included in this. So we wanted it to be looked at from a carbon dioxide reduction side of things, but using the clean air zone aspect to help articulate it to the public better. I'm conscious I'm mincing my words here, but they obviously interconnect, and that's the point. There's the co-benefits there. The report only, as Paul mentioned, says Twyford and not Wokingham. It talks about the potential. What I'd like to know is who's going to take responsibility for actually progressing this and looking at clean air zones in those two places, and when can we expect to receive updates on that, please? I also just want to quickly pick up on the response to recommendation 2 of the transport, which is about the congestion project. Has it been calculated how much carbon dioxide saving is associated with that, please? And I'd really like to see, I'm assuming there's an implementation plan for this that I'm hoping is shareable. I also wanted to have a quick look, because part of this is looking at the previous task and finish group. And on page 93, recommendation 1, which is working with schools, businesses, community stakeholders and developing that vision. In the response, it says the council will work with the climate emergency cross-party working group on this. The working group hasn't met since January. I have been asking when it's going to be happening, but it's just not been happening. So I'd like to understand actually what progress is being made there. And I also wanted to ask about, on page 96, it talks about addressing the gaps and errors in the report that's being done, but there are still some in there. I mean, just an example is the public transport target that's in there. It's looking, the way the carbon savings have been calculated, it's looking across both bus transport and rail transport, but all the targets are on bus transport. There's nothing about rail in there. So that needs improving or fixing. So yeah, there's a few questions on a couple of different areas there. Thank you.
So if I take the question on air quality first, so members of the committee should remember that we have signed up to be a part of the Adept Live trial, which is being run by Reading University on behalf of authorities across Berkshire. They have set up air quality monitoring equipment all over the borough, a significant improvement over the amount of air quality equipment that we used to have. I personally have not seen any of the results of the trial yet. I will take forward an action to ask the relevant people for an update and a briefing in terms of how that trial is going, and perhaps even ask them to come back to this committee and present what the results so far have been and what actions we're going to be taking as a result of the Adept Live trial that is now already live across Berkshire authorities. In terms of the vision for the borough going forward, so that will be one of the focus areas of one of our local deliberative processes going forward. So one of the things that we want to make and understand is what the different groups within the local deliberative processes believe the vision for low carbon and zero carbon living should be across our borough, and understand again what recommendations and what actions they want us to take in order to be able to deliver on that vision. So rather than it just being the views of a cross-party working group or the views of officers or the views of councillors, it will be the views of our residents across a variety of different profile groups across our.
Okay, Rochelle.
Sorry, all my questions haven't been answered yet.
All right, which ones are you not happy with?
The rest of them.
I've forgotten what they were.
The officers, I hope I've written them down.
Sarah, I think the one I remember, I didn't catch all of your questions. I have to say, I did catch the one about item 2 and the congestion project. My understanding from the guys is that we think that the congestion project will have a carbon saving, but my understanding is it hasn't currently been accounted for in our carbon emergency action plan, because it is very, very difficult to actually calculate it, because you don't know exactly, measuring the reduction in congestion and then correlating that with a carbon saving is actually very complicated.
But it's been worked out that we can spend £17 million on it without knowing that, though.
What?
And that's in conjunction with a 40% reduction in car journeys in the borough by 2030 and other targets.
Yes.
Okay, and is there an implementation plan that members of this committee can see?
It's not one that's ready for release, no.
When are we likely to see that, please?
I don't have a date for it at the moment, Sarah.
Okay, because I'm conscious already actions are already happening from that.
Yeah, I think that we've looked at a draft and we've been asked to redraft it. So we are in the process of redrafting. I don't have a date from our contractor of when that draft will be available.
Okay, thank you. And just very quickly going back on the vision, I appreciate that we want to get different. This is going back to what Councillor Murray said. I appreciate we want to get other views from different groups, but we're not actually getting the climate emergency cross-party working group review at all because that group hasn't met. So my question is, when is this committee going to be reinstated with the terms of reference that it set out being utilised, please?
One of the groups that will be engaged as part of the local deliberative process will be a cross-party group of councillors.
Okay, Rochelle.
I realize they're banning new builds with gas boilers after 2025 and no gas boilers after 2035. What is Wokingham planning to do to help encourage people to replace gas boilers with ground source or air source heat pumps? Are they planning to do anything like reduce council tax for 10% for 10 years to help pay for it? And also we have the world's most minuscule amount of required photovoltaic panels. 10% is disgraceful. Can't we bring it up to at least 25% now and increasing over the next 10 years to 50% in all new builds? Because we're going to need the power between the electric cars, the heat pumps, and all the other gadgets we're going to have that will all be powered by electricity only, and the removal of all gas things. We need more power in the overall. Otherwise, we're going to be going with blackouts and going back to the 1970s, which is not going to be fun.
I agree with you that we're going to need more energy going forward. Rochelle, is one of the reasons why we are building our own solar farm. I agree with you in terms of getting solar panels onto the roofs of houses, which is why we are still progressing conversations along the lines of the Green Bank concept that we presented a couple of years ago. And there is conversations about that this week, and there's conversations about that ongoing with a number of different organisations, which I won't name right now because we are going through some due diligence process with some of them. In terms of gas boilers, well, firstly, government policy, I'm not going to comment on. I'm only going to talk about what we can do as a borough. One of the biggest things that we need to do as a borough is drive behaviour change. So just drive sustainable living behaviours within our residents. That's how we're going to convince people right now, if their boiler breaks down, that rather than replacing it with a new gas boiler, they need to switch to an SLC pump or something else. Behaviour change is the single most important thing that we can do in the fight against climate change. There is a process that is beginning at the moment in relation to that. Again, I'm not going to go into the details on it because this is a public meeting. I don't want to potentially prejudice any of those discussions that are going to be going on very shortly as part of an open tender process. But there is a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we intend to do. We're speaking to a vast number of experts in terms of what we potentially could do. And when we're ready to talk about that in more detail, we will come back and we will talk about that in more detail.
One more comment real quickly. We are expecting to change the building regs and the building, the borough design guide, or borough design code, and with the new local plan update. Can we put 25% required solar power in every single building built at present time and increasing it to 50% within 5 to 10 years? This way, if we put it in the building regs and we put it in our own building regs and the building design code, not guide, we should be able to do that. Will you consider doing that?
So a revision to the supplementary planning guidance is being drafted at the moment. The document, I'm led to believe, is currently 170 pages long. I will be totally honest and say I haven't managed to read all the way through that yet. I don't understand all of the technicalities of it either, but there are going to be some very stringent targets within that going forward for our planning and for, you know, in conjunction with the local plan update.
It'd be nice for Woking to lead the country in doing something for a change, including solar panels.
I agree.
And last question is from me, and it refers to page 89 under behaviour change. The second box is down. The officer response is a bit vague, I think. We want more than just recognition, we want activity. So which of the suggestions in column 1 are going to be put into action?
I will say, as there is a process going on that involves engaging a vast number of organisations in terms of behaviour change, I don't want to prejudice that because, again, this is a public meeting. I don't want any of the organisations to be at an unfair advantage in terms of that process. So I won't comment on that right now. But what I would say is that all opportunities are currently open to discussion and a proposal will come back shortly.
Fair enough. So maybe in the January meeting when we have the next review, we could know what actually has already happened without naming names.
Certainly we'll be able to tell you what we've done, but we won't necessarily be ready to start talking about everything that we're going to.
Okay. Let's look at recommendation 1 then, which I propose to amend when we get to it, to ask officers to take account of our comments on the officer response to task force group recommendation. Thank you, Sarah. So we'll vote on that when we come to it. Now, page 93, progress against the recommendations. Are there any comments on those pages, please? If not, then we'll move straight on to the 4th bit of the recommendation, which is to consider whether we've got any issues that we want to be included in the next update reports. Sarah and Rachel.
Yeah, oh gosh, that echoed there. I think this was actually brought up by a member of the public as well, and I have raised this with Rhiannon and Diana separately about, we've actually got 2 separate things going on here. We've got the council's own carbon emissions and a target for carbon neutrality by 2030, and we have the geographic region as well, which are interlinked but separate things. And I would like us to look at in future reports a strong consideration for separating out those 2 targets and the progress associated with that. Obviously, the challenge of the geographic borough and being carbon neutral by 2030 is far greater than the council's own emissions, and we're going to see a lot quicker and bigger progress with the council's own emissions, and actually being able to set them apart and demonstrate to other businesses and the community, look at what the council is doing. If that is all wrapped up in the geographic emissions, it's going to be much harder to demonstrate the achievements of the authority as a business in its own right. And it would also make it a lot easier when reading the report as well. Having those separately. I know that was brought up by a member of the public. It is something I've discussed separately with officers. Could we please have that going forward in future reports, not just to this committee, but to council as well, please? Thank you.
Thank you. And Rachel.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair, I did have some comments on the 2020 report, if that's okay. So looking through the progress, it did seem to me that quite a lot of them, there hasn't actually been that much progress. So I'd like to know why in a few areas. So for example, number 5, it says that the recommendation was as part of the 2021 progress report, there would be an independent carbon audit. So I'd like to know why that hasn't yet happened. Recommendation 6, I'd echo Councillor Kerr's comments earlier about the errors and the gaps in the report. It says that that's been done, but it hasn't been done. And then also number 12, part of that at the end of number 12, it recommends including an assessment methodology, which measures the likelihood as a percentage of success or failure for each item. And again, the response says that's been completed, but I've never seen it, so I don't think it is in the plan.
Could you comment on those points, please, one of you?
Yes, so in terms of the internal audit, it has been added to the internal audit program for the council. So it's now in the agenda, and it will be delivered at some point on this financial year. So it has taken a little bit of time and preparation to identify the scope of the audit, but that is in process. You mentioned the action plan having kind of the number 12 to identify the progress and the livelihood of the actions to be delivered. And we did add into the 2021 report a livelihood and a RAG rating. So all the actions that are in the action plan will be delivered. It's more about the when will they be delivered. So we also added a timeline for them to give a little bit more clarity on are they long, medium, short, or long term for delivery. So that's been added. And I'm sorry, just you mentioned action 6.
Rachel, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, could I just come back on that? Because the specific recommendation talks about the percentage likelihood, and I know there is a RAG rating in the climate emergency action plan now, but there certainly isn't a percentage likelihood. So I just wanted to note it that hasn't been completed.
Well, we did the exercise and the percentage likelihood for the actions that we add in the plan is that they will all happen, they will all be delivered. It's more about the when will they be delivered. So that's why we add the RAG rating and to identify if they are in progress and or if they are slightly delayed.
So what you're saying is that there's 100% likelihood that they'll all be successful.
Well, that they will be delivered.
Okay, I don't think that's probably realistic. I don't think anyone would think it would be. And I think I wasn't on the task and finish group, but I imagine that's what it was trying to get to, so that we can really gauge, which are the big risk areas and to what extent are they a risk.
Could you give us an update on that then when we next consider this? That would be really helpful.
I think it's fair to say that any action plan will be right in the council. We assume that there's 100% likelihood that we'll go ahead with the actions in there, and that includes the climate emergency action plans. We've only put actions in there that we think are viable in the time and within the resource that we have at the moment. There are obviously much more ambitious actions that we could have put in there, but we haven't done so because at the moment we don't have the resource to deliver them, and that's why we have a gap. So I think where Diana says, where we've put those in good faith, we expect them to happen with 100% certainty. Obviously, all action plans encounter issues and problems as they go forward. So, there may be some actions that encounter problems, but that's no different to any other action plan that the council would do.
An update on the position then would be useful, please, when we next come back to this.
Okay. Yeah, it's also good to mention that all the action plans that had been produced by all councils are at the moment being reviewed by Climate Change UK. So as an external project from the government. So, and they will be assessed to a standard parameter. So that's also happening as we speak. And once we get the result, we will be able to share that external review on the action plan.
As I said, an update would be useful, please, next time. Thank you. Right, let's turn to the recommendation on page 79. Sorry, Rochelle, missed you again.
I'm always last.
There's a microphone just in front of you.
I know. Can we have a yearly count of new ground source or air source heat pumps and electric cars and photovoltaic panels that were installed in Wokingham. This gives us climate change positive information that we can use. And it's useful to know how many things that are actually happening as opposed to all promises in a lot of cases, which don't always happen in places. I'm not talking about our government. I'm not talking about local government or anything like that. I'd just like to have a good idea. They can be approximations, but I would like to know.
Yeah, I think the government does publish data around renewable energy installations in all areas. I don't know to what detail it goes down to, but we can make that information available to you.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
I would add to that, sorry, Chair, I'd add that the EV charging positions per, I think it's 100,000 population, is one of the corporate KPIs. So you get information about that quarterly anyway.
Right, well, I'm going to change a few words in the recommendations just to make sure something happens. Recommendation 1, as I've already said, I'll amend, if you're happy, to say ask officers to take account of our comments on the officer response to the Task and Finish Group's recommendation, 2021 attached. Secondly, to note the progress against Task and Finish Groups, because we have considered it, recommendations. Number 3, to note that the next report on the Climate Emergency Action Plan will be submitted to the committee's meeting in January 22. And fourthly, to include the specific issues raised for inclusion in the next update report. Is that okay, Sarah? You're seconding all that? You got those? Yeah, thank you. So may I see those in favour of that amended recommendation? Thank you very much. That is a majority. What's the word? Unanimous. Unanimous. Sorry, I was going to say NEMCON, but it's not. It's unanimous because I'll vote in favour of it as well. Thank you very much indeed, all of you, for attending tonight, whichever screen you're on. So it's lovely to see you all.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Now we move to the Executive Forward Programme on page 101. Any comments on that, please? If not, Alison?
Yeah, I just noticed about the bus strategy going to executive in later this month. And that hasn't been for ONS, has it?
No, it hasn't.
No, it hasn't. I think there was a timing issue around the completion of the draft and getting it here to one of our meetings. And Andy can give more detail.
Andy's got a comment.
Yes, sorry, Alison. Yeah, the bus service improvement plan we were given a hard deadline and a very challenging one by the DFT, and that was that we had to adopt a bus service improvement plan by October. Otherwise, it would have quite serious implications for our funding from the DFT for buses. So we weren't able to bring it to scrutiny before it went to executive, as there wasn't any way of delaying going to executive. So I think, as Neil said, a timing issue. More than happy to have it at scrutiny following it going to exec if you want to have a chat about it and have a bit more information.
Well, I'm not sure there's much point to us having a chat about it.
No.
But what I would want to see is that we programme in to look at the progress, you know, whether it's succeeding in achieving what we need it to do.
Yeah, Alison, the next stage is the enhanced partnership, which has to be adopted by March next year. So I think there is time probably to build that into your programme, which will also have more of the detail in it than the BSIP as well.
So we could look at that in March, or that would have to be after March?
I would hope we'd better look at it before March, if I'm honest, but I'd need to just confirm that with Rebecca, who's leading on developing the enhanced partnership. The enhanced partnership is the next stage in the BSIP process. It basically is our agreement with the operators about what service improvements we want. So it would, I just need to check the timing, but I would think before March. It's going to exec, it'll have to go to exec in March.
Okay, that's great. It's just, I mean, the bus strategy is quite an important part of the climate emergency action plan. It was something we talked about in depth, didn't we, Sarah, during the task and finish. So thank you very much for the answer. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you. And Jim?
Andy, if it's going to exec, is there anything that can be distributed to the members of this scrutiny committee so we can have a look at it either before or after?
I'll be absolutely honest with you, Jim. We're up against it in terms of getting it to exec on time and complete. We are literally still carrying out some small changes to the draft report now. It's going, I believe, as part of the exec process to Conservative group tomorrow night. And I'm hopeful we might be able to release something after that, but providing it's approved then.
I suggest that if when the exec papers are published, that you read it then, and if you've got any queries about it, ask a question at executive, and then that will at least give you a chance to have an input. Right then, the committee work programmes. We haven't got Guy here, but Norman and Alison, are you happy with your work programmes?
I can tell members that HOSC is not going to be able to look at the KPIs for adult social care in November because they won't be ready until after the meeting. So we'll be looking at those in January. However, since we've got an update on the Royal Berkshire Hospitals operations and their plans to, redevelop or move, also we're going to be hopefully scrutinising and pushing CCG quite hard on the GP practice provision, because I think we're all very concerned about some of the GP practices in the borough. To be honest, I thought it was not a bad thing that we didn't have the KPIs, because these are two really big items on the agenda which we can fill the meeting with. Just slightly more worried that the January meeting's getting very full. But if necessary, we might have to have an extraordinary meeting. Okay.
Thank you, Alison. Norman?
Thank you. There's two of the items for the November meeting have been postponed to January. So that's the resource-based units at school sufficiency review and the review of home to school transport processes. So that means we've got a lighter load in November, and again, similar to HOS, we're looking a bit heavy in January. So maybe at the November meeting, we might see if one or two of the January items can be postponed until March to sort of even up the workload across the meetings. Thank you.
Okay. And finally, the action tracker report on page 121. Sarah?
So we didn't look at this committee. I just wanted to ask, in November, we were supposed to have the tree strategy piece, just looking at the general direction setting, and that's not in there now.
Chris, do you want to comment on that, because you're chairing that group?
Sorry, no, that's not the task and finish group. This is the tree strategy.
Right.
The emerging.
Yeah, Chris.
I don't know the state of the emerging tree strategy, but that's going to go on for some time.
Yeah, it was supposed to be, in addition, the idea was we were going to, well, there's obviously the task and finish group as well. That's another one, but the tree strategy piece, now obviously I understand we've got the officer in place, and it was about what we've just done with the waste strategy and actually setting the general direction and having this come back through the course of the year. And that's supposed to be in November, and it's just disappeared off the agenda.
Okay, not my pigeon, I'm afraid.
I'll check with the officers, and if it's suitable for November, we can certainly get something back on. So it's probably just my error.
Because we're obviously losing the waste strategy, and then we're going to have a very light agenda yet again.
Right.
Unless we can get the bus back in there in November.
The action tracker report, then page 121. Any comments on that or any questions about it? Sarah?
Sorry, I just haven't scrolled down. I just made a note here. Was it page 121? Let me just quickly find it. There's a line in there about regular meetings with executive and CLT as per the executive scrutiny protocol. So I wasn't actually sure. It says they're ongoing. How regular are these meetings? Who's attending those, and what's the outcome of them been thus far?
You?
They're regular but not frequent. I don't think one's happened for some time, so I will pick it up with the chief executive about getting those meetings going again.
Thank you.
Okay, lovely. So if that's agreed, then I declare the meeting closed and thank you all for your time. It was a very long agenda. Thank you.